Go.
All right, we're doing it live.
Fuck it.
Fuck it, let's go. It's been a crazy couple of days. I have loved being in Austin. This is so much fun. I do have to say, as much as I love living in SF, Bitcoin capital of the world for sure, and just incredible community of people, Nostr people, Bitcoin people, all kinds of good folks. I'm super stoked now to be here with Mr. Tony Giorgio. I have had the great pleasure of getting to know Tony over the last couple of years. Been a big fan of yours from identity stuff. Obviously a big fan and investor in Mutiny. Love what you guys are working on there. Huge fan of what you're doing with Nostr Wallet Connect. So yeah, man, super stoked we get a chance to talk about all kinds of weird shit we might not otherwise get to talk about.
Yeah, no, I mean, like we first knew each other online.
That's right.
Like a little while, like a year or two, and then like fanboying on each other's work for a little bit, and now it feels really good to be in person, collaborating, like talking about crazy visions and ideas for the future, and not just like, for our own selves, our own company, but like what crazy shit can we think of next?
Yeah, and for the future of humanity, the future of whatever evolution is pointing us all toward too. It sounds like we have another little guest joining. A couple perros around here. So maybe one place I'd like to start off is we were talking about, you have, it's some really interesting and eclectic taste in music. And you mentioned that some of your music is very, sort of punk and rageful. Some of it's a little bit softer and more peaceful. But I think in all of it, you have real taste. You're not just doing what the mainstream is doing there. How did you develop, I guess, some of this like punk aesthetic, or walk me through how did Tony become, this contrast of punk and also you've got the peaceful side?
It goes back to the skater days, man.
You were a skater?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Like you could say skater, you could say poser because I wasn't very good, but I tried.
You had a board.
Yeah, I had a board for many years throughout like middle school, high school. And even in college, like longboarding kind of evolved in that nature. So it's just like goes back to the punk mentality, listening to stuff like Green Day when I'm starting out, like as a baby teenager.
Yeah.
And then evolving to like, eventually stuff like Bring Me the Horizon, or then getting into things like Whitechapel if I'm trying to get into like death, suicide metal.
Oh, yeah.
But it all kind of, you could say it's just like teenage angst that like could have possibly never left me.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, did I really mature if I'm still listening to, the punk songs from the 2000s era? But I mean, that's when I grew up, the 2000s. So, my dad always listened, maybe even stems further than that. My dad was always like a Metallica fan, Guns N' Roses, things like that. So, I didn't mind it back then. He listened to a lot of like Eminem and rap too.
Yeah.
But that metal really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And so like, even through the years, like there was that phases of listening to a lot of like emo, screamo kind of music there for most of the high school. I mean, I still listen to that stuff all the time. And now kind of getting into, more like atmospheric metal, like black gaze. Like you're supposed to be like shoegaze, but black metal.
Yeah.
I've been enjoying that recently as well. It just kind of just speaks to me of like there's an atmosphere of it, in my opinion, where it calms me.
Yeah.
It's like other outsiders that don't understand like emo music or screamo or death metal would just see it like as angry rage.
Yeah.
But like it's almost like, if you give Adderall to an ADHD person, like it calms them.
Yeah.
Or it's supposed to. But if you just give it to like a normal person that doesn't need it, it like amps them up.
Yeah.
So to me, it feels like black metal or death metal or anything like that just calms me. It like gives me peace.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a normal thing, but it's just like, okay, things are right in the world. This is chaos, but it's like organized chaos.
Yeah, I like that, organized chaos.
Yeah, and so I think that's what appeals to me the most about it. It's not just some random guy screaming.
Yeah.
There's a reason for it.
Okay.
And he's saying something, and then sometimes it's hard to listen to screamo and screaming music and like understand what the words are, but if you try to hone in on it and try to appreciate the music for what it is, like you can eventually figure it out. And almost trying to figure it out, like my co-founder Paul, like we'll go to Costco or something and I'll listen to my music and I'll be like, okay, this is a story about a guy who got hurt by a girl and they get back together and he just hears screaming.
Classic trope.
Yeah, I mean, like a classic song in general, right?
Yeah.
It's like the thing, we all have shared experiences as humans.
Yeah.
And we all express express them in different ways. Some people want to scream about it, but they're really sad, or like maybe they're happy and they're like getting pumped.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's music really just brings us together collectively, and we all express ourselves in different ways as normal humans in society. So music's just an extension of that.
Yeah, and you were saying earlier, I mean, like whoever you were hating on Spotify a little bit, which I can get behind as well. You're saying whoever controls the music controls the mind, essentially, and it's something I've always felt as well. I think most people will have had this experience. There is something. There's like the amount of information compression in music is incredible. Like, you can convey so much emotion. Like, really, for me at least, there's no faster way to move myself into a new emotional state than to listen to a song that maybe was perhaps associated with the state that I had when I was first listening to that as a kid or whatever. Why is that? Why do you think music is so primal in a sense, or so like gets down to the core of what we are?
Yeah, it's like memories, right? Like, it's almost exactly what you said. Like, if there's a new song I listened to like a few days, I've just been listening to it on repeat. Firewell, I think it's called.
Okay.
And like it's in English, and there's one sentence in there that's in German, and it's like this is war against everyone.
Okay.
And it just says it in the most epic, like that's the only parts of the song that it screams. And I can remember like just the first time I was listening to that on the way to the gym, and that got me so hyped, and I was like so impacted. I was like, that's the energy I want to have all week.
Yeah.
And that is the energy that's carried me on throughout the whole week. And when I'm not listening to anything, or I think, what song do I want to listen to first? It's like, I want that energy I had when I first heard that song. And like going to the gym and like working out and feeling pumped. Like, I want to feel that same thing again. It's almost like a drug in a way, if you want to think about it that way.
Oh, 100%. It is.
Yeah.
It releases whatever kind of, serotonin or endorphins as you listen to it.
And so like, probably for reasons beyond me, just like, it just feels like the human mind attaches to, it's almost like, if you were to feel pain in a certain way, or you're sick and you remember like, drinking egg drop soup or something, or drinking Sprite as a kid, you almost associate, drinking certain things or tasting certain things as like memories, as the first time it happened to you. So it's like, that's what we get to experience. And so with music, maybe I'm trying to relive my teenage years, and anytime I think about it, I think of like those moments, and those were fun moments, so it's like, why did I grow up?
Well, I would argue you've done it in the right way. Growing up is mostly a scam. So.
Right.
Do you make music at all?
I used to play bass a lot too.
Okay.
Played a little bit of guitar as well, but I bought a bass even like 2 years ago when I left one of my jobs, and I was like, what do I do with my life now? And I was like, oh, this has turned out horribly. Yeah. So I was like, let me buy a bass again, and I just didn't pick it up enough again to just get back into it. But I used to play bass, and that was a lot of fun.
That's super cool. You mentioned Black Gaze. I've never heard of that. I'm gonna check it out. I'm big shoegaze fan myself. Love psychedelic rock. Love going to live shows. Do you go to a bunch of these kind of shows, or is this mostly at home?
I haven't done as many shows as I wanted to in Austin. I have a friend, Ty, who he's really big into kind of like the 80s kind of heavy metal.
Yeah.
So anytime he's like, hey, I'm going to a concert, do you want to go? I was like, yes, let's let him go. And it's not like my first selection of my preferred metal, but like I do enjoy it still. So like anytime we go, it's like, yeah. And it's just so fun looking at the crowd of people too.
Yes.
Like, you go to, sometimes I'll go to, there's like, I forgot the organization that's called, but it's almost like emo cover songs from like 2000s.
Okay.
And like they'll do like shows at multiple spots in Austin, and like you can definitely tell the crowd is like young 30s, like still dressing in skinny jeans and like cut off shorts and things like that. And then you go to the 80s metal bands here in Texas, and it's like, okay, these are clearly like 40, 50, 60-year-olds, like bald heads and tough looking guys. So it's fun to kind of like live through those different types of metal and phases there.
So does that mean you'll be still skinny jeans at 80 going to these shows? We'll see.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of hard to imagine like music evolving so much over the years, right? Like I'm sure that maybe your perspective, it's like the stuff that you would listen to 10, 20 years ago. So I don't know if we just like stagnated at all. I mean, definitely like creativity has gone on and like hearing new things, but it feels, it's almost like dog breeds, where we used to have like 5, 10 dog breeds, and then throughout the 1900s like exploded into like hundreds, and now we pretty much have the same dogs.
Well, you know what's interesting about that? So on the one hand, I mean, I was telling this to my girlfriend the other day. It's like, for me, like the golden era of music, I do think like the 70s, late 60s, early 70s had some special stuff going on. But from my own lifetime, I would say about like 97 to 2001. Like I love that whole genre of rock, of psychedelic, of shoegaze, also of like electronic music. I'm really into trip hop. Obviously, great hip hop from that era as well. A lot of kind of like weird ambient, kind of like, I don't know if you've heard like Boards of Canada or that kind of music. Anyways, that's like an era and genre I always go back to. And, I was saying kind of the same thing. I was like, man, this music was so much more emotional, so much more creative, so much beautiful, much more beautiful. Like what happened? And my girlfriend's answer is like, bro, you're just getting old. I was like, oh, fuck, you might be right.
Like, what are the kids listening to these days?
These damn kids, So it is tough. Like on the one hand, I do agree with you. And on the other hand, like shit, maybe our own blind spot as we're getting old. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, to that other point though, I wonder sometimes like, in terms of diversity of music, something I'm always really interested in. I'm lucky. My dad also listens to he got me exposed to a lot of the stuff like trip hop and kind of weird music early on. I do think there's a lot more really cool stuff out there, but I think it's harder and harder to find. So I would argue that maybe one of the challenges, which is going to get into maybe some of the stuff we'll talk about with Nostr and open source in general, is like, I think the internet, it just got hard to use the internet is one of my views. In the early days of the internet, I feel like I would just come across more weird stuff all the time. And, over time, I wrote an essay you may have seen a couple of years ago, like how to disrupt Google. And a big part of that thesis is that Google is getting shittier and shittier over time. Their incentives are, incorrectly aligned to show you ads. And if they're showing you ads, they're no longer working on indexing the long tail. Not to mention if there's stuff that you want to find, like maybe you have to go to Yandex, just Google's just not.
Or even what they're trying now, and it's basically trying to be an AI over Reddit.
Yeah.
Which is coming out horribly.
And by the way, Reddit, for the longest time, I would just append Reddit to any of my searches anyway. And but you would have to like, shovel out the diamonds from the rest of the crap.
And now it's like closed down.
And now it's closed down.
Log in.
Yeah, it's terrible. I've stopped using Reddit in the last 2 weeks because now every time I'm not going to log in.
No.
Yeah. I hate that. I hate where the internet is going. So let's talk about that for a minute. I believe you're a Coggy user. Is that right?
Yeah, I just started using that 2 weeks ago, actually.
What do you think about it so far?
So far, it's good. I haven't noticed anything. Sometimes I still, by habit, just type DuckDuckGo.
Yeah.
And so that's my default. So like I just switched to Kagi, paid with Lightning, which was great. I was like, you know what? Like they were on Stacker News like a month or two ago.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, okay, well, these guys care. Like, these guys are Bitcoiners. He was like talking about, like, we were talking about like blind authentication schemes because that was what I was kind of working on at the time. So I was like, you know what? Like, it's finally time to give these guys a shot.
Yeah.
They say they don't collect data or like store data. So I was like, okay, let me, I can't give those guarantees with DuckDuckGo either. Like, you never know. So I was like, let me try a new. It's very intimate sharing search activity.
It's the most intimate thing I would argue.
It's so, I mean, now I've just started running local LLMs to like ask general questions. So like I feel like I'm using search, like unless I'm trying to find like a news item or trying to find, like if I'm asking a general question, I'll just ask my local LLM. Like it's just like, okay, how do I make this type of food? Or what compounds go into this material? Like anything that's just a question that doesn't change ever throughout history of mankind. I'll just ask a local LLM because I can store that data. I can delete it. It never goes anywhere else. You don't learn anything about me. If I just start searching up like, Chinese food, you might think I'm a, Chinese food enthusiast or a Chinese person, right? Like, but like like many years back, I like downloaded all my Instagram data before I deleted that. And it thought like I was some Portuguese soccer player.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, well, I'm not Portuguese. And like, I played soccer one season in high school. So maybe, and it's just like, in some ways they're just guessing and they can't verify anything anyways.
Right.
So they're just assigning profiles to you and discriminating against you from there. So I forgot what the original question was, but like searching things online, like I try not to do that as much as possible because it's like, I don't know.
I mean,
bad.
there's so many ways I want to go with this on the Portuguese soccer player thing. I mean, you have many names and many alter egos here, which is great. So that's a new good one for you.
I'm diverting that. I actually was a Portuguese soccer player.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Your OPSEC here is this coder in Austin. So, why do you think, given the amount of money that's being invested in these companies, and you've got like literally the smartest minds in the world being paid ungodly sums of money to target us, why are they bad at creating profiles? Like if you're going to target us and take away our privacy, why is it at least not good?
Yeah. You know what I think?
Why?
Because ad money doesn't even care in the first place. If you have to think, why are these profiles existing at all?
Yeah.
And where is the money here? It's ad money.
Yeah.
So like Facebook creating a profile for you and saying, oh yeah, this type of person really likes buying Tupperware.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to throw a Tupperware ad on there, like we'll get you way more users than you ever had before. And so it's like in some ways they could be correct in some ways, but the other chance is like the ad tech industry has so much money. It's almost like fiat problems.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, if they're off by like even a magnitude of order, they're still making a whole lot of money because they're just like getting eyes and eyeballs, and ads work really well. So it's just like, hey, it doesn't matter if we show this product to the wrong person. I think they're just making so much money, it doesn't matter. And Facebook's making so much money, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, they could be right in a lot of ways, but like whether they're right or wrong, they still get the same paycheck.
Yeah, interesting.
From the ad company, they just have to deliver results.
Yeah. So, one of the reasons, and I'm curious to go in this distinction when you use local LLMs versus search engine. One of the things that I really like about, I don't know if it's Coggy or Kiki or whatever, but the Coggy vision to me is, I don't know if you read, they have two very interesting blog posts. One is talking about this concept of, I've talked about this, Keanu, I already forgot the name. It's not the indie web, the small web. Mm-hmm. Anyways, and so there's like modes, I believe you can use within their search engine where it's like, okay, I want to, search for various information, but I just want to find like long tail blog articles type things. And to me, that's so much. I think there's like two different ways I use the web for discovery. There's one that's like, okay, I have a very specific question, and yes, and we'll talk more about local LLMs. Like, great, just give me this answer. But then there's another way where, I've spent probably way too much of my time growing up and in my current quote unquote job as well, just like going down rabbit holes. And when you're going down rabbit holes, if you really want to get to the bottom of something, and there is an art to this, like there's the art of figuring out like, well, who actually has something interesting to say, who actually has taste in the ideas they're describing and what they're building, like who links to other really good stuff. And in my experience, one, you have to actually just enjoy doing that. And two, you need to have like infinite time to be able to like go down the rabbit holes, find things. It's like, it is just like a fun game. It's not something you can just get to quickly, but you can't really play that or find the kind of like weird, bizarre alpha on the internet. If you're just like constrained to searching on Facebook, even Twitter. Twitter used to be good at this and it's still okay. But that's what I personally want, and was going to get back to with the music as well, is, the internet, the promise of the internet in the early days of the internet, and it could be so much better, is 8 billion people have 8 billion perspectives, and everyone is an expert at something. And, everyone's weird in their own way. And if you can find what everyone's a little bit weird at, and like the little alpha or, understanding that everyone has about their own little niche, there's so much cool shit to learn. But if that's not being indexed, it's not clear, how to either publish that information or find that information, then, we're all going to revert to this kind of like median, whatever, crappy individual consumer, which I even hate that word, consumers, or even users. Like, how about like just people, right? Anyway, so I guess my one dream experience I want, and I'm hoping something like Coggy can provide this, is, the ability to do kind of general queries that are kind of research queries. It's not like, what's the weather going to be tomorrow, but okay, like, what does the future of a Nostr-based internet look like? Cool. Like, I want to find the most interesting, directly and indirectly related blog posts and things about that. And my hope is I want to see that for all kinds of things, including for music. Yeah. Cool. I want to be able to go down the rabbit hole, and Bandcamp has a little bit of this, but how do I find that, like, that band with only, 100 listeners, but they have great taste and they have a chance to really blow up? How do I find them early? That's what I want.
See, I want to hone in on the very last point, because that's what I thought the whole time. I want to find that band and artist with a few hundred listeners.
Yeah.
That is a really interesting, like, apply that to a blog.
Yes.
Like, show me a blog that,
Correct.
like, you think only got like 100 page hits.
Yep.
I mean, even 100, it's like, oh, well, if you actually are a real user and you're one of 100 that stumbled upon it, it's like, well, that could very well be very high value content.
Totally.
And so there's a wild story from, must have been like 2018 or something. I got high as fuck.
Yeah.
And then I just started browsing the internet.
Always a good way to start.
For lightning things, I guess. And I found like the most, it was like early 90s web view, right? Like it had like random forums and columns everywhere in different colors, and like nothing made sense. But it was like this one guy's blog post, or this one, he's had it the same for like 2 decades, 3 decades, whatever. Yeah. And he just posts his random thoughts and he shares his pictures, and like there's kind of a community forum aspect to it as well. Like it looked bizarre from like early 90s, and it had lightning integrated with it.
Really?
Like you would have no clue. And this guy's talking about like he is like he's an expatriate. He's like left the United States. Yeah. He has no passports anywhere in the world. He like lives in the jungle, and like he has built his own. It sounds like Darthcoin. It actually legitimately sounds like Darth. It very well could be Darthcoin, right? Yeah. But I never thought about that until now. It sounds correct. Yeah. But like, and then like I looked at I started going deep.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, like there's valuable, like, and there's people saying, oh, I love this work, love what you do, like hope everything's good with your dog. Like people like cared about this guy, like follow this guy's life. And I look back and I'm like, yeah, he has blog posts and like random articles going to like the 90s. It's like, and he's like a lightning enthusiast, like almost like 2018, like you barely had good websites with lightning integrated. Yeah. And I just remember looking at his Twitter account, and it was like locked with like 400 or 500 followers. Yeah. And I was just like, oh my, but the sad thing is like, I never found that. I even tried going back. Yeah. I never found that ever again. And I'm like, oh my God, like this was like a hidden gem. Yep. In the entire internet.
Dude, and I mean,
how did I find, I don't remember how I found it.
Yeah, how did you find it?
I have no idea.
Well, my initial reaction would be share it with me. And now, you know.
I can't.
And I know exactly what you mean. There is, and I don't know if this is just like a certain personality type. Sounds like you have this as well. I certainly have this, where there's such, for me, extreme satisfaction in finding these personal blogs where it's like, this person's brilliant. And you know it, and you know no one else knows it. And like, I mean, okay, at some point you want things to go mainstream. You can't stay underground, whatever, hipster forever, or maybe you can, I don't know. But like, it's so nice to, to find some secret on the internet and feel like you're sharing in this like special connection with someone. And yeah, I wish I had that like 100x more than just fucking wasting my time scrolling on any crap. Yeah. Social media of any kind. Reddit used to be good at this. It's still okay, but as we mentioned now, they've shut down. It's gotten a lot worse. One thing that I've heard some of my friends talk about that are also, internet hunters per se. A lot of this has moved to Discords, which is interesting. So, and some of these are paid. So I think there's interesting business opportunities around that. Like a lot of the alpha or secrets in the world maybe are hidden on these Discords. One day I would hope that could be a more interoperable version of the web, perhaps Nostr based.
And how much are they actually secrets if it's on Discord server?
Yeah, no,
like
that's true.
Eventually leak.
It totally will. And so there's only like any of these quote unquote secrets are only secrets for like a period of time before it goes mainstream or not. But yeah, man, like finding, a couple of examples that come to mind. I mean, I found some like random dude who just like, I don't know how I found this either, but it was like all of his photos of like, he just rode his motorcycle, from the United States all the way through Mexico. And like has these crazy fucking adventures in there. He's like talks about doing peyote and all this stuff. And it was just like so inspiring. I was like, man, this makes me want to get on the road and like, just like live life to the fullest. And I never, I read a bunch of his stuff. I lost it. I had another rabbit hole, when I was visiting Mexico City. There was this guy, Jacobo Cohen, or not Cohen, I forget his last name, but he was like some researcher that had very interesting thoughts on consciousness and reality. And he'd done, extreme research trying to prove something along the lines of we live in a simulation, blah, 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 which in my jam with Keon, we go very deep on that one. And I start going down that rabbit hole. There was a guy I'd never heard of, and this dude had done incredible amounts of research, all these interesting, some of them were even peer-reviewed studies, from legit university. I'd never heard of this dude. So what do you think if you, obviously, I know you have nothing else on your plate, if you were trying to build the ideal tool for finding undiscovered gems on the internet, what would that look like? Or where would you even start? Yeah,
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like, okay, if you do have access to like the internals of a Google or DuckDuckGo or a Kagi search engine, it's like, okay, well, it's how did the index come to be, like where's the raw data?
Yeah.
Like if you can get access to that raw data, like, okay, why do you think this is a popular hit? It's like, okay, maybe you can do reverse indexes at that point. It's like, okay, show me the ones that, like I said, like find the ones that get hundreds of views or between 100 and 1,000 views. And maybe you can kind of search through that and even try scraping those articles, right? Because you'll probably get a very large feature set of things.
Yeah.
But like, without raw access to actual indexers, maybe you can try to build your own, but like that's got to be really hard.
Yeah, it's
like part of the data that feeds these search algorithms are what people search for. Like Google's is very heavily indexed based on what people search for and then what they click on.
Yeah.
So they can do their own algorithm, and they change their algorithms all the time because they eventually get gamed.
Yeah.
And so like you just don't know what to trust there. It's a whole system that's gamed. I mean, the very first thing I think about now, it's like, okay, how would I get access to that raw data and do these sorts of like advanced queries that I like tweak and play with and find the right thing? It's like, well, the only raw data of information that I know that exists right there in the world that I can query against
is Nostr.
It's Nostr.
Yeah, I come back to this all the time. This
So
is why I
it's
got
like-
excited about Nostr.
Yeah, it's like, I was like, show me. I want to see. Probably the first thing I would try to query is show me a user that was actually like around over a year from now. Like that's probably a good metric, or maybe like from January 2023.
Yeah.
Show me someone that early on Nostr who has like posted at least like once or twice a week.
Yep.
Maybe even once a month if you want to be liberal, but like a few times a week. Who only has gotten like 2 or 3 likes on average.
Yep.
And it's like that guy must be interesting because he's already on Nostr.
Yep.
So he has something to say. And he has a reason to be there in the first place. It almost like kind of filters out, thoughtless sheep.
Yes.
Like I wouldn't want to run a query like this on Twitter. Like there's probably like millions and billions of people that would, and mostly bots or other crap that probably fit this profile.
Yeah.
But like, show me just like if I can query for any sort of like, is this a real person? Well, if they're on Nostr, they might be real if they're posting consistently and they're not doing spam. You can do some sort of like spam index.
Yeah.
Show me that guy's post.
Totally.
And if he's still around and he like only has a few views, like he's saying something that like isn't. Well, Nostr isn't the easiest to discover brand new profiles that like aren't well known or aren't interacting with other people very often. Like I will say that, but like you could do a raw query like that on Nostr today with all that data. But I don't know anywhere else you could.
Yeah. So this is the reason. I mean, there's many reasons I'm bullish on Nostr. One of the reasons I'm most bullish is, I actually think we can have a gradually then suddenly moment with Nostr where, you basically have 2 giant forces in the world right now. Well, 3. One force is kind of driving the other forces. You have AI basically creating more and more content. So the amount of deepfakes, the amount of like fake shit in the world, it's already really, 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 really bad. And it's about to get like so much worse.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think people realize what's about to hit. And so, in that world, one of the things I love about Nostr so much, and Stu's talked about this a lot, is like, okay, Stu and Hazard, like, okay, just having signed content, right? Just having like the PGP vision of like, but like people actually use it. Like that's huge. Just starting with like, okay, if I can somehow establish this is actually Tony and he signed this data, great. Like I know this message is his, cool. So that's already like really powerful in a world of AI. Then the thing that I'm so excited about, as we've talked about in the past as well, is the identity piece and the open social graph. The thing that everyone wants from Facebook and Twitter and all this stuff is their graph, but they protect that very, very heavily now. They're protecting it even more, right? That's the value. It's the information and then the graph that's layered on top of. And so what I'm so excited about in this world, and the thing that I most want to, see happen, hell, maybe one day I'll take a stab at building something myself because I get so obsessed with this, is, basically many different takes on what can you do with an open social graph. One of the very first startups I ever tried, you definitely don't know this, but even before, I worked with Bright doing solar in Mexico, was my buddy and I, we tried to do right out of college, we like totally bombed everything we were trying to do, but it was a social network for solar panel owners. And it's very interesting because I actually think this is a good business, not a huge venture business. It could be actually, but it's a very good business because it's a very high cost item. Like if you're installing solar panels on your roof, and it's one of those things like it spreads. Actually, a guy at UT Austin, this guy Varun Rai, did an interesting study. Like it's spread somewhat like a social network. If you see your neighbors get it, you're more likely to ask about it. If they got it, it's more likely to be economical for you. It spreads, throughout neighborhoods. And because it's a high cost, some of these solar installers at the time we were looking at doing this for like 2012, were paying, whatever, thousands of dollars for qualified leads, potentially much more for a closed project. And so, yeah, basically like our original idea was just using, at that time, you still had access to the Facebook API. And it was just like, okay, cool. Anyone that goes solar, cool. We're going to do a bunch of referrals through this, try and figure out the right people to refer, and, split the proceeds with you from all the referral bonuses we make. Which, I mean, again, it's not like the biggest business in the world, but like, I still think someone can do that and make a lot of money on that.
Right.
Solar companies are still, and this is true for any high cost item, right? You can do this with cars, whatever. But of course, then Facebook shuts down their API. Same thing with Twitter in the early days, right? Like you just could do so much cool shit with the Twitter graph and all of their open data. Of course, they had, their currency was eyeballs, attention. They had to shut that thing down. So a couple of views that I would love to see, and I've even thought about shaking off the rust. I did Justin Moon's Biddle Boot Camp a few years ago.
Yes.
So I'm not particularly technical, but I did do that. I was definitely the slow kid in the class, but I finished. And I've thought about a couple of things I would like to build. And maybe people listening to this, maybe someone will take this idea and build it faster, because I'm sure it will take me forever. But one is, a few people have talked about this. I'd love to see one thing, which is just like the beauty of Nostr is you can have so many different specific clients. I love, companies and projects like Primal and Damus. I'm a user of both, invested in Primal. Like, I think those are all great. But personally, I don't like doing scroll on my phone. I think that's just bad for me as a human.
I just deleted the scroll apps on my phone.
I did too. And like the reality is, I mean, I still use Primal a lot on my computer and stuff. I haven't had Twitter scroll on my phone forever, but like it's not, even if it's Nostr, like scroll does not help me as a human. That's me. Other people, maybe they can deal with it. I can't. What I want is a whole bunch of weird long tail clients that help me find the long tail of the internet. So one client I want is a client where I log in and I can either random or, again, through web of trust, like finding people that I know would be interesting, just randomly see or selectively see the network from other people's point of view. So just like, hey, like give me a quick snapshot. Well, what does the world look like to Tony? What does the world look like to, and you can do this today if you go and find their input, but like, I just want a really simple way to do that. Mm-hmm. What does it look like, to be, I don't know, like a mid-30s Japanese guy? What does it look like to be like a mid-30s Japanese girl? Holy shit. That's different,
That is really interesting, because that gives you insights you'll never see
totally
in your life at all. You can't log in to see the algorithm that someone is sharing, to me, on Twitter.
Yeah.
On Nostr, I mean, you can't. And what's funny is like, I've noticed my behavior on Nostr a little bit, where probably within the first few months, I've followed most of the people that I think I've ever followed.
Yeah.
And then it's sort of like the same people, or like I see them and like I kind of like them, but it's not worth a follow to me. I feel like I try to very carefully curate my feed, and like lists never kicked off too well, I think, on Nostr. I think there's not yet. I think there's still an avenue where it's very useful, and I would love to easily, like if I could just like one click button or two click button, throw that guy into that list and all these lists, and I'm like, okay, this is exactly what I want to see right now. Because like it eventually, like, some of the e-girls hopped on Nostr. I was like, oh, this is interesting. We got a new
oh yeah, interesting.
From a new perspective. I was like, for a little while I was like one of the top zappers to some of these girls. So I was like, they need to stick around, man.
Yeah,
like, honestly,
you need to have their perspective, right?
we need all, like, it was probably, I don't know, I came into Nostr probably about a year ago from now, a little bit over a year ago. So like I was like, oh man, it's been like 4 or 5 months. It's like kind of the same new people. Like finally a new group of people hitch on. And like, we need, like, they're battling censorship problems on like other social medias. Like, they're talking about Blue Sky, and that's being like, it feels like rights and content on Blue Sky is getting worse more than it's better. They just added DMs in a public way where they're like, oh yeah, we have the right, like we can see all your DMs and we can decide to censor. Yeah, it's all public. Like they actively do censorship. They were like, yeah, we specifically do censorship on your DMs right now. And that's how they're rolling out stuff. And it's like, oh my God, what's going on?
How does that, I mean, I'm not an expert on them.
It's just like public DMs, and I don't even know how it works. I still, like, I set up my own federation on Blue Sky.
Okay.
I have no idea where my keys are. I have like no idea how, like I had a few friends join my federation. It's bluetony.com. That's my Blue Sky. Yeah. I wanted only Tony or tonyfans.com, but that was taken. I was like,
fuck. Yeah.
But I don't know where my keys are or any of that. I forget why I brought up Blue Sky, but I'm like, we need interesting groups of people joining Nostr in different ways. So I was like, you know what, like, and I was like, no, not many people are zapping them. Like, I gotta help show them
Yeah.
what this Bitcoin thing is about and why it's so powerful here. And unfortunately, like, they didn't stick around. Not just unfortunately for me, as a viewer of great high class content, but it's just unfortunate that like I don't want it to be in a situation where we just keep getting echo chambers after echo chambers, and it's like the same people that have been around all throughout the years. That's why sometimes like I've been a little bit more liberal with my feed and followers, because I'm like, if I sometimes see like a random person that normally, if it was on Twitter, I would no interest in following them. But it's like, oh wow, this is like a genuine person.
It's not a Bitcoiner.
Genuine, yeah, not a Bitcoiner. Genuine hobby interest. Sometimes like gardeners really came into Nostr like a few months back because a gardener TikToker.
Yeah, interesting.
and so like I actually did follow a few gardeners. And, and you know, maybe a few of them dropped off or so. I could probably go back in my follow list, but there's like, yes, like just I want to see what normal people see.
Yeah.
But you bring up a good point. You actually can right now.
Yep.
If you know of those normal people,
create a list, the normies.
yeah, and then just like almost, you probably have seen. We talk about like finding niche content or whatever. You probably have seen those websites over the years where you just hit like show me a random website.
Yeah.
And it just shows you something completely bizarre or something normal or something you've seen before, but typically something you've never seen before. And it may be dumb or niche or whatever, but like you get a perspective you just never had before previously, or you weren't able to just like find it.
Totally.
And so like on Nostr, like I would love a show me a random person's feed.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. 100%.
See what their world's like.
100%. And I think where things get interesting, I have my own thoughts on how sort of like the stages of adoption are going to go. I agree with you. I'm also not that worried. Like to me, Nostr feels like 2010, 2011 Bitcoin. And I actually feel very lucky to have found it this early. And like, it's going to take a couple of waves of adoption. I actually think I'm more bullish on using Nostr for things beyond social media for this next wave. Right. So stuff like, we'll talk about Nostr Wallet Connect in a minute, Bitcoin adjacent stuff like the mints, which we'll also talk about. But just to finish up with this thought, one idea that I saw, I forgot who was this, I forget his name, I don't know him, Nem Pipalia or something. He was someone that at one point was interested in some of the DID stuff, and then he came and got involved with Nostr. And I saw he put out a note where he was like, hey, I'm trying a new service, message me and I'll find you, 3 people I think you might like to follow. And I was like, this is a great starting point. Cool. It's a super good starting point. And I think where things can get really interesting is with the web of trust. You can do completely random. That's cool. But what's much cooler to me is this web of trust thing. So as an example, and I think you can do this explicitly or implicitly. Implicitly is, okay, we take all the signals that we have, and again, it's all public data. So it's great, including, I know zaps are not verified, and that's another question, but I think that value signal is also going to be very important. But, we have all this public data. And now I could also do it explicitly, creating lists, but to your point, in very, very specific content. So I might say, for example, when it comes to like looking for mints, Tony's my guy. Tony's my guy, Bob's my guy. I got a couple of these dudes. I want to see what mints they're using. When it comes to, ordering Chinese food, maybe it's also, I don't know, but like, you know what I mean? Like my buddy that's really good at recommending whatever, this kind of like music.
Food connoisseur, yeah.
Yeah, whatever. And so I can have all these different lists. Where I think this gets really magical then is I can start saying, okay, I want to get recommended 3 people, but I want it to be people that Kian follows or people in my web of trust follow that you think are a good fit for me. And specifically for these topics, I want, 3 people Kian would follow for web search and discovery, 3 people and Tony would follow around mint stuff, 3 random people I don't know. But like the ability to easily use some of that extra data, the web of trust, some of the value signal to surface. So it's not purely random. That would be one kind of content, but it's curated in a way that's not possible on the internet.
Even specifically to hone in on that, whether if it's like 3 people from this person or 3 people in this category, specifically people that I probably have never seen before.
Yeah.
Because like I wouldn't want it to be like, oh, we think you would like Michael Saylor on Nostr. It's like no, okay. Like I know who Michael Saylor is.
The Sailor Shanty's coming back.
Yeah. If I was interested in following him on Nostr, I would be following him. So like I want to remove those probably like top 1, 2, 3, maybe top 5. Maybe you do it naively like that. Like remove the top 5 profiles
totally
in this category, and then the 95% probably is a lot of people you've probably never seen before. But specifically, show me people that I've never seen before that you think I might like.
Totally
in this category, or from this person, or from this topic that I might be interested in.
And I think there's two really big opportunities. I mean, the major clients like Primal and Damus, like they do a good job, but like, for example, in Primal, and I think I know why they've done this. It's great that, they have some of the algos there. They're very explicit about using algos. And for a normal user that just logs on, doesn't follow anyone, you kind of need that. Like what's going on at the top of the network. I personally have a pretty curated list on there. So I love just like show me like literally just sequential order. I don't want any algorithms. What I really want to see though is the marketplace for algos, and no one is really pushing this yet. People have talked about it. Have you seen anyone working this, or how would you go about designing a marketplace for algos if you were building that?
Yeah, the marketplace is hard. Like the first thing I think of is like, well, how would you solve this in like a free way?
Yeah. Okay. Forget marketplace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you show a recommendation engine for a brand new person you have no clue about?
Yeah, totally.
And I think we've seen a little bit in this category. I think maybe Primal or a few other apps ask you, hey, what are 10 things you're interested in?
Yeah.
And like pick 1 or 2 or 3. And of course, Bitcoin's one of them. I think it's like
it better be.
Yeah, it's like gardening or like flower, whatever. Normie things. I know people are trying to get normies on board, but so you probably have to first ask them like what topics you're interested in. Twitter still does this.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably successful still. I mean, there's a reason they have done that for many, many, many years. So you start out asking like, what topics are you interested in? Before we dive into further, do you think that's a good approach as a way to try to start recommending things to people, or just by asking them explicitly, or do you try to find out in some other way, maybe through just like letting them start actively using it normally, or I don't know. Do you have thoughts about the way we've sort of tried to solve that?
Well, my first thought is, there might be one dominant way, but my hope is that there's just like a huge sort of like open field of experiments, and maybe different people come into Nostr in radically different ways. I think one thing that, I wish maybe we start to change, and I think in the next year it will change the framework of conversation around Nostr. It's not just social media. So like, how do you start building up a profile, ideally that you own the keys to, but from whatever your entry point is. And so maybe for some people it is social media, but I think it's great that we're trying to get the normies on there. I personally don't think that's going to happen in the next wave. A couple will come on. That's cool. Sorry about that. Actually, I want to make sure. My girlfriend got sick. So I'm just talking about Bob and make sure she's doing okay.
Yeah, no.
got a little bit of food poisoning actually.
Ouch.
So I think that, different people are going to come into the network in different ways, and depending on kind of your use case. So as an example, I think a lot of people are going to come in potentially first through marketplaces. Okay. And so, we've been talking a little bit about this. My guess is that, the next big wave is probably going to be Bitcoin related marketplaces, but where you have that identity. And so here's an example, we talked about building local Bitcoins on Nostr, and maybe there's going to be a whole new wave of people that don't do any of the social media stuff, but they get their first in pub because they're trying to buy or sell Bitcoin for fiat. Great. Those are all now new Nostr users. Now, once they have that profile, maybe another site, it's like, hey, log in here with Nostr. And, it's like, okay, well, you're already using this for local Bitcoins trading. Maybe you want to actually use a mint, and cool. That's probably, I think the next thing that's going to pop is, you need to find a mint that people that trust. Those are all sort of Bitcoin related. But my broader point is I think that'll bring a new wave of people, probably Bitcoiners first, that are not into the social media. But then maybe once they already have some reputation, some profile built up there, then when they do log into something like a Primal or a Damus, they're not coming from scratch. They have some connections, some context there. So I think that's one answer, is that different people are going to come from different avenues. For just brand new people that you want to onboard in a more social form, yeah, I do think that, asking directly is interesting, but my sense is that, I'm just thinking about this out loud. The algos and AI in general is getting so much better. One cool thing would be, imagine a world where you could bring your AI assistant, and some of this is going to be in the cloud, OpenAI. I hope more of it's local. I don't want to talk with you more about local AI, but, it'd be cool if you could also just like bring your AI with you, and your AI, like, I don't know, like knows you from searches you've done or whatever, and can help you, curate your initial feed. What do you think? What do you think is most likely, or what do you most say about?
Yeah, I'll get into that in a second. The first thing I think of, well, as you were talking, I was trying to also think about, okay, how would we do it besides just topic based?
Yeah.
Or asking the user the question. Two things. Your point about, okay, I came into this Nostr app through local Bitcoins. And so like you have already start to define what the user, his profile is, like how they got there.
Yeah.
You kind of start to know those things. I was even thinking about, okay, well, we have so many generalized Nostr feed clients that they're not specific to a specific topic.
Yeah.
So if you start to have like topic specific, you can start immediately showing them things for that topic.
Totally.
And then that works really well. Another thing is like, what if, we do a little fake it till we make it with some of these Nostr clients, and we just like start, I don't want it to be like a deceitful thing, but start like injecting things into their feed of random notes on random topics and see if they interact with it.
Yeah.
And if they do, it could be like AI. I think there's still something that's there's been attempts. The execution of AI based like social media profiles. I was interested in that for a little bit. I did some crazy workflows with ChatGPT where I'm like trying to get it to like craft a personality and like have it tweet something. And if you ever ask ChatGPT to tweet something, it is the worst tweet you ever seen in your life. It's like filled with emojis and happy faces and hashtags and like it's like
maybe that's what's popular then.
I mean, maybe, but it's just like it's hard to imagine
for the normies.
I mean, even a normal person talking like that, I'd be like, oh, I don't think I've ever seen a normal person talking like that. Usually, like I see normal people like yell about some random thing that like Kellogg's did. Yeah. Like, it's just whatever infringement happened there. But I had to go through like 4 or 5 different. I had to send it to ChatGPT 4 or 5 different times. Like, okay, start artificially adding 5 of these 10 grammar mistakes, and start stripping things down and get rid of all emojis and even if I say don't use emojis, there's like so much you can do, so much context. Like it's got to obey you and your question, right? Or its goal is to like ChatGPT or any AI is like to answer your question or your problem. But when you start diving in, when you have like 10 to 20 requirements, it like usually just fulfills 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So then I would only give it like 4 or 5 requirements at once and do another workflow. I bring all this up like because I think there's something there still with like a really good personality based AI on top of Nostr, and when you can try to fake it till you make it. What I hate and what I believe other people hate, like Sean on Nostr has been saying, I forget his last name all of a sudden. He works at Amboss, but he's been saying like he has blocked like 200-300 Nostrich.house AI profiles in Nostr already.
Oh, wow.
Because it is just going through and commenting on random things, and it thinks it's the authority figure on whatever the question is, even if it's not involved in the question at all.
Yeah.
And like in theory, I like the potential to have that, but the execution has to be like 99% of what like a possible human would say.
Yeah.
And if it's commenting on things it has no idea about, it shouldn't comment on those things, and it shouldn't even attempt to comment on. But to be fair, there's a lot of people I wish would not comment on my things.
That's a high bar.
Yeah. But if it's trying to I don't know. It's hard to navigate between like what is a real person and what's not a real person, and how to make AI seem like a real person. At least if you can like trick the user in a positive way, like helping to figure out what they're interested in, helping to even they can be helpful too, even if it was unprompted. Like if I have a general question that I post to Nostr and it answers my question accurately, do I care if it was a bot or not? Like there was something on Stacker News, I don't know, I think it was like a whole year ago now, where like I think the API access started opening up more so people could experiment with APIs. Like I love the Hacker News bot on Stacker News.
Well, that's what I was about to say. I actually wish we had more of those kind of bots on Nostr, because I actually get my Hacker News content on Stacker News or Nostr.
Right. And so like for a little while there, I feel like someone was experimenting with an AI based bot. And so like a question would be asked and it would eventually like respond with its version of the answer. And sometimes it would be an accurate answer and it would be upvoted. And then someone on Stacker News was, oh, I hate this, or like I don't believe, like. And then another time, someone on Stacker News was just posting old popular Reddit posts.
I like that.
Could have been Keon. I mean, like Reddit faked it till it made it. Like a lot of the early content from Reddit was from the creators of Reddit.
Totally.
As like different nymphs. And so it's like, what does it matter? What is the goal you're trying to get out of Stacker News? It's like active engagement, like discussions and things like that. Who cares if the prompt was fake?
Yeah.
If you didn't know it was fake, it was still a good experience and you enjoyed and you interacted with it and you got good discussion. And then like real people will pile on.
Right.
And start discussing real things. So it's like, you know, it kind of goes into like, well, who cares if the world is a simulation? I'm enjoying it, you know, or maybe I'm not enjoying it, but like it's a real experience prompting real responses out of you, whether that's negative or positive. Hopefully it's a positive experience, or hopefully it doesn't leave you with such a negative, jarring experience. But also humans can have that happen to you anyway. So it's like, you're not going to avoid that by avoiding AI. So it's like, hopefully we can just get into that place where whether it's AI or not, if it fools you, does it matter if the outcome is still positive or gives you that same experience a human would give you anyways?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting question. And my first thought, I'm not sure on that particular thing. I have to think a bit more about that. But one point you made, I think is a very good point, is with the Hacker News bot, but also with people posting like old popular Reddit posts. There is an argument that, you know, it's happening a little bit organically on Stacker News, maybe a little bit less on Nostr, but some there as well. Because we have the economic incentives of zapping, you know, this is one of the big things that Nostr opens up is, you know, in a world where, you know, there's going to be a lot more content created. Maybe the cost of content creation comes down a lot. The curator is really a lot where a lot of the value accrues. And so one beautiful thing I would love to see is, like, to your point, like, imagine if you or someone, I don't know if they can make enough money today, maybe there's not enough users, but they could head in this direction. You know, all they're posting on Nostr or Stacker News, which because it is a Nostr client, at least partially, is content that they found really awesome. So for example, you found this guy that, you know, you wish you'd kept up with his blog, the 2018 Lightning guy. If you posted his link on Nostr, I would zap that and be like, this is dope. And I wish there was an easy way for me to like bookmark that or put that into a list, which obviously I could. Similarly, I actually think if anyone's listening to this, maybe you're not technical, but you want to get involved and help Nostr. One really cool thing is just like try and go and find awesome, old, amazing, great content on the internet and post it on Nostr.
Yeah.
One thing that I think could be really cool, and I think Keon was playing with an idea of this at some point, was imagine just going and finding all of the best posts from like Bitcoin talk forums. Like that stuff is so valuable. And I'm sure there's got to be a lot of these other forums out there.
Today, an old Hal Finney post from like the 90s about eCash that just came out. And it was like that it went to the top, and I was like, wow, I've seen a lot of Hal's eCash posts, mostly on Bitcoin talk forums, but just the fact that like he was talking about something that I don't think anyone has talked about much, and even in the eCash world today, inscriptions with eCash notes.
Yeah.
It's like having something that like he was talking about the beauty in Bitcoin bills, or sorry, it's just bills, dollar bills. It's like, you know, some of the old bills look really beautiful and they have like their own unique spin, and people collect them, and there is actually a collection, a whole collection market of this. But that just surfaced today, and then all of a sudden I saw one of the comments was, oh wow, I didn't realize how Finney still had his blog posts up.
Yeah.
You know, from the 80s and 90s or however long it's been, and it's still running. And I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
It's like, and then I saw, I think it was rsync was just posting even more. I don't think he was the original poster. He may have been. But then all of a sudden, like a few more Hal Finney old blog posts started dropping, and it's like, oh, this is great. Like, you know, it's almost like the hive mind, like find something new and unique, even if it's 20, 30 years old.
Right.
It's kind of beautiful to see that surface up to the top.
I would say especially if it's 20 or 30 years old.
Yeah.
Right. Like if something lasts that long, like there's something true or something, you know, potentially much more, I don't know, hidden.
Well, that's the hard thing. It's even harder for it to like that. Probably that his blog post probably still lasts because, you know, his family has kept his servers running still. You know, they knew Hal Finney better than anyone, and they knew how much he cared about technology, and he probably, you know, set things up in a way where like, hey, if I die tomorrow, like after 1 year, my DNS record like will go away because I stopped paying for my DNS server, right? Like that's usually what happens. But Nostr, you can't do that.
Exactly.
With Nostr, like, you know, there will be relays. Like Primal runs a caching server relay. We run a caching server relay. Like there's notes that will just like never go away.
Yeah.
And you only would find that on something like Wayback Machine.
Yep.
but you have to know that URL exists,
How,
right?
how does Wayback Machine work?
It just like indexes. So I think there's a few things there. Like you, as a random internet user, you can say, hey, you can post a link into Wayback Machine, and you say like, I want you to like timestamp this, and so you can go back and see different timestamps, and I believe it even like indicates when it might have changed. So you can like see key change points throughout like a decade or so.
Okay.
Maybe even decades. I don't know like the longest post I've seen a Wayback Machine, but you have to input that URL into Wayback Machine and then say, okay, I have 20 saved copies of this website throughout the decade, and then you can pick one. If you don't know the URL, you're not like Wayback Machine might have something really cool that you've never seen before.
Yeah.
But if you don't know the URL, you will never find it.
Who pays to like store all that?
That's a good question. I don't know. I
It's a
assumed
nonprofit or-
it was like kind of like a public good, probably nonprofit. There's a few, I think, spin-offs of Wayback Machine. So there's a few companies like that. Internet Archive.
Yeah.
I assume it's like just a public, just a public good at that
Yeah.
point.
Or or some donors
But
are
like
just stepping
it'd
up.
be hard to discover anything with it. So it's not a discovery, it's more of an archive, but not a discovery. It's like you go into a library that like an old library that keeps records of everything. It's like you can actually kind of discover things. You can just open a random book. You can go to a random shelf in the library and look at something, right? But without a URL, you can't do that with the internet. But on Nostr, I mean, I can look back at posts years ago, and in 10 years, doesn't matter if Nostr's still around or not. I have the potential to go back decades and see
Find that
what
data.
someone said at a very specific time, and they can't ever delete it. Which there's pros and cons to that. I mean, you can't ever delete anything truly digitally.
Yeah.
But someone could actually go back and maybe AI is better in 10 years, and they can actually go back to the Nostr early days right now and start running these algorithms from it's almost like you're going back in time. It's what's it called when you back test. You can back test the algorithms as far early in time as you want.
Point. Yeah.
You're never going to be able to, like Twitter could internally if they wanted to, if they had any reason to do that, or you can just have like an individual on Nostr do it with no one's permission needed. And if AI technology is like that easy for someone to locally run that, like you can totally do that.
It's a badass future heading
Yeah, I
towards.
mean, so that's what I kind of like about Nostr. It's like, is this like, it's the raw data.
Yeah.
And you're getting raw, like, and we're not on Nostr for like engagement and content farming. Like a lot of that doesn't work well on Nostr. Some of it does. I mean, you do get some influencers. Odell was posting on Nostr today, like, hey, sorry guys, I haven't been doing my good morning tweets because people think, they're invested in Primal, but so they're like, apparently the Primal search engine, the recommendation engine is very heavily biased on like replies.
Yeah.
So he said he just will post GM.
Yeah.
And then like 100, 200, 300, 400 people
Yeah.
will say GM back to him, and he'll go to the front of the top results on Primal every time. He's like, I'm trying to get out of the conspiracy that like I'm influencing the results on the.
It's a high signal conversation.
Yeah. So you have people like him just posting GM, but then also like there are a lot of really like Lynn Alden.
Yeah.
She has recently said, or not recently, it was like a year ago. She's like, I really love Nostr because like I can actually post my raw thoughts.
Yeah.
And it's not, I don't know how many followers she has on Twitter, probably a magnitude way more than on Nostr.
Too many. Yeah.
Let's just say 1 million, just to throw out a number. And you have 1 million people dissecting your words, interjecting with random things, like just
It's got to be
things,
stressful.
Yeah, and so you just can't. But on Nostr, you can post your raw thoughts, and like you'll have real people responding to it in a way that's not designed to like, oh, I'm gonna dunk on this person. It's like, okay, well, you're probably not gonna get any sats for dunking on someone. It's like sats are like the true signal.
Yeah.
In a way. So like, yeah, you can game some of that. Like, and zaps aren't like the most secure from a perspective of like, yeah, you can try to game it. You can zap yourself.
Yeah.
And try to get boost. But like, I feel like not enough of that has come out, and like Primal has done a good job of like trying to filter, okay, this is like too many zaps from like a random person, we're not going to display it in the UI. And I think they've done a really good job of balancing like what is potentially bot activity or like out of the norm activity, and just focus on like, okay, typically people will do these things, so like we're gonna focus on that as the signal. So I forget what, but yeah, it's raw thoughts.
Yep.
By natural, that is not the most popular social media where you're going to get a lot done, but it's also raw notes that you will forever be able to back test queries and like find interesting things if you wanted to. So like that's probably the most interesting, and it's open.
Yes. Well, and that's what I was going to say. To me, the beauty of Nostr, similar to, I think, a reason why a lot of Bitcoiners like it's permissionless, right? In the sense that I can create my identity. If I can do math, I can create an identity. It's just pub key. A lot of these other systems, it's permissioned identity. So like non-starter.
You can't do math. Like someone will do it for you.
Exactly. So someone will do it for me as long as my bot can do math. But the beauty of that permissionless is exactly it's the evolution can happen so much faster because people can try shit. And I think we're just starting to see that happen. I think if you're deep in Nostr, you're seeing right now a lot of devs. Many of them are being funded by OpenSats, open source. But you're seeing a lot of people, Stu and Hazard, all kinds of people trying crazy ideas. And I think in the next 18 months, some of that's going to start really bearing fruit. But the key to me is, and if I had to like leave one thought on all this Nostr stuff for everyone, is, it's not just social media. There's going to be literally everything on the internet is better when you have a shared identity and open data protocol, which anyone can build on. Permissionless means experimentation. Experimentation means faster evolution, in my mind. And then for sort of maybe non-technical people just throwing out ideas, and maybe this is something we should do on Stacker News, I would love to see maybe more either bounties or people working to say like, okay, cool, let's find like, contests, like what's like the coolest, Bitcoin, the most interesting Bitcoin talk forum post you found, or what's the most interesting random weird blog post or new person you found on the internet. Like, I think some of those contests, and maybe I'll even do this. Like, I think that's a great idea.
Right.
And like,
and then you zap it, right?
And then
like,
you zap
proof of work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you got that value signal, and that's what services it.
And if it, you do, because like it feels like, replies or like following new people that like, might not say a lot. I was surprised by like the concept, and I don't know the exact stats or anything, but like there's a lot of people out there that just lurk.
Oh, I would say like 99%.
Yeah. And so like all it takes is like that one prompt for them to maybe they've been following you for years and you've never seen them pop up, and maybe your likes they've never even popped up. Like I don't know how true it is. It's hard to verify, but like I have like 10,000 followers on Nostr, and I have like 500 on Twitter. I mean, I deleted my Twitter and restarted, but like it's just like over the course of a few months, like it's gone from like 4,000 to 10,000, and I'm like, either this is fake, or it's a lot of people that are lurking and like following me by just happenstance, maybe through retweets or something, requotes. But I don't feel like the amount of unique people that have like liked or starred or something with me have increased.
Yeah.
It's about the same amount of likes. It's about the same people that are liking stuff from 4 months ago that are liking my stuff now. But I have like almost double the amount of followers.
Yeah.
It could just be all lurkers.
Yeah. It could be.
All it takes is that prompt of like, hey, I am really interested in these things, and so Max is asking me a question about it. I'm going to post it, and then now all of a sudden you can follow them. Because it is hard if you're not an active poster and an active like commenter on Nostr. It'd be really hard to get any follows at all.
Yeah. That's a fair point.
I mean, that's probably true of any social media too.
Yeah, good. Okay, shifting gears, because a couple things I want to make sure we get to chat about. One, you talked about, search is one thing, local LLMs you're using for like very specific questions. I know you actually gave me some great recommendations based on your feedback. I have a pretty souped up M3 Mac. It's dope.
Yes.
I've been running some local stuff on there. What I'm curious your thoughts. I know this is not your main focus, but to kind of summarize for listeners, and I talked with Christopher about this recently as well. You basically had the hyperscalers, the closed source guys that came out with the best models. Open source, as soon as it gets it, maybe it's 12 to 18 months behind, but then they take that, remix it, remash it up with new stuff. And it's awesome. You can do so many more things. I think agents that are speaking openly together, I think that's going to be really big, using all kinds of open source off the shelf models. However, you've got other folks, like there was a Founders Fund post a couple days ago, basically arguing that we're on the S curve of training models. We're still early enough that, only the hyperscalers investing on the order of $10 billion or like, are able to play in this game, which is like 4 or 5 companies. And that closed source models are going to continue to run away over the next year or two. Do you have any opinion on how closed source AI versus open source AI develops in the next couple of years? And then, in the long run, decade plus?
I don't think I do. To be honest. Yeah, I mean, it's an area that and in fact, like it's funny, like I gave you some tips on like AI stuff, and I'm like just the baby.
Yeah.
You know? I really, I don't know how it'll play out. Like it does seem like, and I could be even wrong in my description of this, like people training AIs based on the results and content of other AIs, right?
Yeah.
Like, and maybe that works really well. I mean, there's so many things people can tweak to. I mean, it's kind of like a public good, right? Like ChatGPT, like people are abusing ChatGPT APIs in order to train their own models, and I'm like, fuck yes, let's fucking go, because like I love this concept of like, you know, the big giant and the small little guy that can get like 10x value with like very little cost, or 10x value for their life. I mean, they could build products based on the results of this big giant that, like, technically speaking, is like a competitor, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think they want other people. I mean, it's OpenAI, but it's supposed to be a nonprofit. It's a corporation.
Yeah.
It's ran like a corporation. I don't think they want people leeching off for their work to create their own AIs.
Yeah.
But it's hard to stop that. And then they regress. I mean, the reason why I don't use ChatGPT anymore and OpenAI products at all is because they have so aggressively closed down their website that, like, I would have to, like, for a whole month, I had to go through the most aggressive CAPTCHA that I couldn't
CAPTCHA's
fill.
what got you?
Yeah.
It wasn't Sam Christ or Sam Altman being the Antichrist or something.
Yeah.
It was CAPTCHA.
It was CAPTCHAs, man. I would fail them every time. There would be like 7 CAPTCHAs.
Gotta step your game up, bro.
They would take like 10 seconds each, and there'd be like 7 of them, and then when I failed, somehow I kept failing them, I would have to do it again, and that was on every question. Even asking a follow up would trigger another 7 CAPTCHAs that I had to fill, and mostly failed, and have to do it over again. So I was like, it's the same thing with Reddit. It's like anytime like I use a VPN, and like I'm not going to turn off my VPN just to do this. So like they started heavily closing out, and I'm a paying user, and that still couldn't get past the CAPTCHAs. Like they don't care if you're a paying user or not. They were worried about people training AIs on it, so they got too aggressive with CAPTCHAs. They just don't price their product accurately. If you need to add a CAPTCHA, you're probably not.
Yeah.
If you have to add a CAPTCHA to paying users, you aren't charging your product accurately.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like I don't. There's a lot of things I don't think OpenAI is doing correctly, but I mean they're killing it. But
maybe.
they're whether or not they're killing it based on the amount of like value and work and everything that's been put into it, whether that's a fair outcome in terms of killing it. But I think from a society perspective, from like what I can go to ChatGPT and AI and do,
it's pretty remarkable.
It is crazy.
It's an incredible piece of technology.
I held off as long as possible, and then it's funny, my I had this like infamous why I changed my mind about Nostr posts.
Yeah, I've read it. It's great. Yeah.
That was also, and I would say I'm a decent writer. I've gotten a lot of compliments.
No, you're an excellent writer. It's really good.
That one was like so heavily AI written.
Seriously?
Yes.
Oh wow.
I mean, like, you know, I started out with like my thing, and then eventually I that was where I was practicing AI writing. So like it took me. I was doing a 3-day fast in the woods of Texas, like a little cab. Actually, it was a little tent in the woods in Texas, and I just did a 3-day fast. Me and my dog, and I was like, I'm gonna figure out. I had my Starlink internet.
Yeah.
Of course, I can't go anywhere without internet, even in the forest in the woods. So like I was like, okay, I redid my whole local development setup. I started using AI for the very first time, like OpenAI for the very first time. That it was only like a year ago. I held off for like 6 to 8 months ever trying it, because I was like, no, fuck that shit. I'm not gonna get involved in it. I don't believe in it, whatever. But then same thing with Nostr. I was like, fuck it, all right, I'm caving. I'm going into it. I'm gonna say why and all of that stuff. But yeah, it's that was my first. It's so funny too, because like people are like, oh wow, yeah, Tony's writing so good. And it's like cool, because like I remember Gigi like almost like 2 months ago, he was like, this is worth reading again. Like this is my favorite line. I'm so glad Tony said it. I was like, oh, it's funny you say that. Like, I did not write that line in any way, shape, or form.
That's
like,
hilarious.
My conclusion statement, my conclusion paragraph was entirely AI. It's like one of the things I said is like, hey, summarize this and close it out.
That's hilarious.
But what I'm having trouble with right now with my writing and my blog. Like we just did a blog post today. I'm having a very hard time condensing my thoughts in a blog post. Like I can get like 100% done with the blog post, and then all of a sudden writing the tweets to summarize the blog post, I just can't. I can't do.
Yeah.
I can't. And so like, and I tried get AI to do it.
It can't do it either.
It does. It's like doing hashtags and emojis and bullshit like that. So like something like that. So we have I guess it's a policy now at Mutiny is like whoever wrote the blog post
has to do the tweet thread.
No, someone else has to do the tweet thread.
Oh, nice.
And so I've done it reverse, and so like we've experimented with it, and it's like, oh yeah, like the person writing the tweet thread summarizing the post, that's so much easier than when you're writing the blog post and writing the tweets. I don't know why I went to that tangent, but like so we had Mark start this week, and he's got to write. He's writing his blog post announcement. It's all summarized too. But we was like, hey, by the way, you need to write the tweet thread because like I wrote this blog post and I can't write the tweet thread, so we're
welcome aboard.
Yeah,
I know exactly what you mean. I mean, I blog some. Not super frequently, but sometimes as well. And I think part of it for me is like by the time you've written the post, you say what you want to say, you're just done with the shit. You're just like, I don't want to fucking go through and like
also, but like if I could write it in a very short summary, I would have wrote it that way in the first place.
Exactly.
There's a reason why it's like 2 pages long.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm curious your point. You mentioned you did this 3-day fast in the woods. I know you were very interested in technology like daylight and e-ink. So it seems to me, I'm curious kind of your own personal relationship with technology. It seems like on the one hand, you're clearly like incredible super coder, shadowy, incredible super coder, shipping all kinds of stuff. On the other hand, you clearly see some of the limits of that and the benefit of getting away from it. How would you describe your relationship with technology and how it's evolved?
I would say like right now, I'm not doing a good job with it.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said earlier in this podcast, like I recently just deleted all my scrolling apps.
Yeah.
It was like Nostr, Amethyst, which I will say, like going back to it, like, oh man, I fucking love Amethyst.
Yeah.
And like I've always been critical of it. I've even forked Amethyst, and like I've gotten thousands of people to run my fork of Amethyst with just a few changes. But like I've regressed back, I think, with my social usage online, and I've just like become the toxic person that I feel like I was. So like last week, almost in the same vein, like I drove to Colorado last week, and I spent like 3 or 4 days in the mountains at a random cabin. Yeah. It's like there's these signs. And to be fair, like I have an overland vehicle, like a 4Runner. Like I used to have a huge tent on top that I was like sleep in. I would go off into the Wyoming mountains or the Colorado mountains, and just be there. And like, I also didn't enjoy that either.
Yeah.
Like, and there was times where I would just like car camp, or like sleep in my car at like, Crackle Barrel parking lots.
Yeah.
And there was,
I like Crackle Barrel.
Yeah. I mean, I love it too. And then they let you sleep in their parking lots, or like Walmart parking lots and things like that. And like, I know I have to do those things.
Yeah.
I don't know why exactly I have to do those things, but then when I'm in the act of doing those things, sometimes I really hate it.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's like everyone in theory loves camping.
Okay. I like glamping a little bit more sometimes. Okay. I like it in theory. I like being in nature. In theory, yeah.
In theory, there's something that really appeals. I mean, you probably have experience of knowing that, like, you don't like camping enough in practice.
Like setting up the fucking tent, and, like having the bear outside. I like being in nature.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for this trip last week, what I did a year ago in like a tent in Texas, it was raining the entire time. So my fast was actually miserable.
Yeah.
And I was like, I usually don't fast anyways. Like I was like, okay, let me try that for the first time. And it was miserable. It was raining. I couldn't go outside. I was stuck in a tent.
Yeah.
Didn't do shit for 3 days.
Yeah, that sounds horrible.
Yeah. And so like, I do these things enough where like, I know I have to get away, but I know I might not have a very good experience when I get away either.
Yeah.
But there's just something about, well, it's not working for me right now anyway. So what can I lose?
Do you do any kind of like, I don't know if you've like come across like the deep work book or that whole concept. Do you like have any way you bracket your days where it's like, look, I need to like, I'm going to fucking just like be in the zone coding or writing this. And like, I'm not checking anything, no internet. And then once I'm done, then I can go and engage in like the like kind of the shallows of the internet.
Yeah.
Or do you just like just go with it?
I wish I had better habits around that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard because like a million things will pop up in the day and you feel like it's so urgent and you have to respond, and like what's the current conversation right now? Like I want to be part of that current conversation. So like there's this like always sense of urgency. I will say some of the best work I've ever done is usually like at night. I mean, as any coder
exactly.
Right? And a lot of times like more specifically late at night coding, getting high as fuck.
Yeah.
So usually I don't smoke during the day at all, and I'm a solo smoker at this point. I had my pot days in college, and like I went insane, and like literally insane.
Yeah.
And so now like there's a lot of like hard work. It's like, okay, it's the end of the day. I don't necessarily want to do these few hard things. Like actually weed helps me do very hard things.
Interesting.
Because you know why?
Why?
Because when I'm high, I don't think it'll be that hard.
I like it. I like it.
It's almost like being a founder.
This is the alpha tip, everyone.
Yeah.
Just get high and it won't be that hard.
It's almost like being a founder. Like the NVIDIA CEO said a few months back, like someone asked him, like, would you go back and change anything? Like, and he would say, well, if I knew what I knew now,
I wouldn't do it.
I wouldn't do it. You trick yourself into thinking it's not going to be so bad. And then you keep persisting through it, and you're like, it'll get better. It'll get better. It'll get better. And you never does.
Yeah.
And that's what makes a founder, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I also don't smoke a ton these days, but certainly had my period as well. And in the 2 years where I was doing more coding, in fact, I was actually quite proud of this. And again, would not consider myself a real, engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but I was showing Francisco one of the first little apps I built was like a little bot. Was interacting with the Bitso API, and this was back in 2018 or something. I was like, hey, like what people need is just a simple app where I can just like, all I want to do is like put some money in and like split it between Bitcoin and stable coins. And, very simple. But to me, I was like, this is actually, whatever, great product. And went from zero to building that. It was really exciting for me. And I remember in that period, or when I was doing Justin's class and we were building Bitcoin in Python, one of my favorite activities would be to get stoned, listen to shoegaze, and just sit there and code. There's something so zen and just like you were so in the just flow state, for me at least. And it was just like something else I like to do now, not necessarily with weed, but with music that I'll do a lot is with writing or kind of deep focus. I like to find one song and just have that on repeat. And it's often for me, something like psychedelic rock or shoegaze, sometimes like ambient, but just keep flowing. And in a way, it's like the music just becomes this kind of like we talked about earlier, an emotional trigger, but I'm no longer listening to the words. It just like fades to the background.
That's a lot of times why I listen to like heavy metal and death metal, right? Like the screaming. Sometimes like I do try to hone in on like, okay, what are they saying here? Let me try to hone in on their words. But other times it's just like white noise.
Yeah, it's like exactly.
like death. Like it's funny. I remember in high school sometimes I would listen to mathcore, heavy metal mathcore.
Okay,
like very technical, like high tempo beats, like 200 beats per minute, some insane amount of beats per minute.
It's fast,
and you can't understand anything. And like, and there's like some guy death screaming in the background, sounding like he's dying. And I went to sleep to that.
Yeah. All right.
It's probably why I'm fucked up in the head. But it's like going back to like it calm. Like you just throw something on, like Black A's is what I would like it smoke, and code to at night. So I wish I had better habits around technology. I think I have to go to I would say I go to the extremes because I don't have a healthy process throughout normal everyday life.
And it's hard to do that. Like I've tried to do this on and off for many years. One thing that's been working for me recently is I've found that like swimming has helped me a lot. I swim in the bay, which is great because it's super cool and that like shocks you into reality. Like I was telling, there's no luxury beliefs when you're in like fight or flight, like I'm about to die mode. So that's one way. Or even just swimming in the pool. And then afterwards, like I kind of feel like, okay, I'm really worked out. And then, okay, I'm not looking at anything until I write this post or like write whatever at 2 pages of it. And just like after that, you can do whatever the hell you want. If you want to be in the shallows, like knock yourself out, but I'm going to write this thing. And like, that's what I did for my last blog post. And I don't know. I found it to be very effective and something I'm continuing to experiment with. But I do think the most, as much as I love technology and Nostr and all this stuff, I sometimes think is the right answer. Like even like with the daylight computer stuff, which is very cool. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's e-ink. If you're not already blue light pilled, get away from blue light, wear the glasses so you don't stay up all night. But, sometimes I think about that. That's awesome. And I love the direction they're heading in. But like, it's almost like kind of funny in the sense, like we as, quote unquote, I guess, tech bros are trying to use new technology to get away from technology. Yeah. And it's like, is the answer, like, we should just probably like I don't know, like not use technology. And that's a very Luddite position, so it's difficult. But multiple times in my life, I've tried to go without a phone at all, and
Yeah.
it's crazy. And I actually made a couple posts on the Stackers. On the one hand, it's the deepest I felt in reality since like childhood. Like there's no like you're in reality. On the other hand, the tools that I really miss, like maps, music apps, podcasts, like those are Uber or whatever. If I need to get a car, like those are truly useful things that like, oh, it's really fucking hard. Like I went a couple of years ago, I visited Berlin and I went, a day and a half without Berlin. It's like, well, if I can't use the map, like shit, how do I get around? And yes, people used to do it, but like we forget how much technology has like accumulated benefits to us over time. So my hope, where I hope all of this goes, maybe the answer is just withdrawing. I think the better answer is somehow to build things that are just more tools, and try and the distraction and the scrolling. I feel like that's the vampire,
And like you're addicted to that too, which is bad. It's not just that you're doing it or you want to do it or that the activity of it is like bad or soul sucking. It's that you're addicted to doing that. And that was hard. Like, when I went to the resort in Colorado last week, with that experience, like I didn't touch my laptop at all.
That's great.
From like 8 a.m. to like 5 or 6 p.m. I didn't touch my phone.
Yeah.
And like that to me was like, whew.
Back to base reality.
Yeah, and then I checked my and we we're a team of 3 now, a team of 4 at Mutiny, and like we all do customer support, and like there's always something that someone is asking or like there's some bug or whatever. So like the concept of like, oh well, if I step away for a day, like someone's gonna have some catastrophic failure and like something will go wrong, and I have to, if I don't help out. And we all took a vacation last week.
Yeah. And
like there was maybe like 1 or 2 questions throughout the week. Like maybe it was a light weekend, we got lucky, but just the atmosphere, like the concept of, wow, I like went without my phone for 9 hours.
Yeah.
And like nothing, and I checked it and like, oh yeah, none of these things matter.
None of it matters. Exactly.
None of them matter. And so it's such a while. So I came back and I was like, yeah, I would love to do that more. I mean, like my phone is right now a graphene phone with no SIM card.
Okay.
No internet, no eSIM, none of that. And so like I have a hotspot, and sometimes I'll turn off the hotspot. Like when I was driving back, like I didn't even realize it, but for like 4 or 5 hours, like my phone didn't have a hotspot, and I'm like, I'm like, oh, this is great. I got 0 notifications. I mean, I'm driving, so like I shouldn't check my phone.
Yeah,
anyway.
Exactly. That's not the time to be getting notifications.
But like even at gas stations and stuff like that, I was like, oh no, I don't care. I'll just leave it on my bag. I tried out the Punked phone for a little while.
I haven't seen that.
Which is like it's like a tiny screen and it can just send call. It's a dumb phone is what they call it. So like I tried those for a little bit. It had Signal. Yeah. In its own like weird e-ink kind of display, but the Signal notifications never come through. It's like if there's one thing that I need, like if I could just have something that is just Signal notifications. Yeah. And I can reply back and nothing else. It did nothing else. It couldn't surf the web. Yeah. Maybe there's I would, in college, I even taped the time on my phone. Like I didn't want to see what time it was. Yeah. And so that only lasted like a weekend and part of Monday. Yeah. But it was the most glorious thing ever. I actually got that tip from listening to a podcast about I think it was like TweetDeck or something or some Twitter thing that got bought out by Twitter. Yeah. And like the founder was like, yeah, I mean just like live without the concept of time. If you live without the concept of time, like all of a sudden like you're free. Like it's technology and like this pressure that like, okay, what time is it now? I have XYZ things to do in the future. And so like this guy tried living his life. Now if you tried living without time, it's a burden on other people more than it is you. Yeah. And only because like for coordination. I watch Seinfeld as like my hobby side, it's like Seinfeld, The Office, things like that. And like, I would love to just be in like the 70s and 80s in New York. Yeah, I think about that with San Francisco too. I would love to just be, in the early 2000s in San Francisco. I would love to just have like very simple, like we're all on the clean slate. I think probably the biggest problem is that we're all plugged into technology. And if you are unplugged from technology, then like you're missing out on things. Like when you join back up with other people that are plugged into society, you don't know what they're talking about. Like there's a new thing that everyone's in the know on, and like you're just the one person out of 6 that don't know it. Yeah. And like, no one's gonna like catch you up, or maybe you can try to get caught up on the features or the news items, but like the problem is like we're all on the same level field. So if you don't have that technology, you're like 4, 5, or 6 layers below, and that doesn't feel good. So like I would love to live in the 70s and 80s in New York where we're all at the same field. Like, you know, we say, hey, I'll meet you at the coffee shop after work.
Exactly. After
that doesn't exist anymore.
It doesn't. How do we bring that back? Can we bring that back? Can we start another? We already have Bitcoin and Nostr. Can we start another revolution?
Yeah. Can we become Amish?
Yeah. Well, okay.
Amish, but with Bitcoin.
Well, it's very funny you mentioned that. So, Kevin Kelly is an author I like a lot. He created Wired Magazine, and you know he's got a bunch of great books. You know, he has in one of his books called "What Technology Wants." He has a couple of very interesting chapters. One, he asks, like, I'm certainly not endorsing him, but his philosophy is interesting. But like, he basically questions, was the Unabomber right, and what got him, not in what he did in his reaction to it, but you know his general gist is basically like, you know, instead of using technology as tools, which is kind of the Steve Jobs vision, bicycle of the mind, the tools are using us, and we're losing what makes us human, which is desire, motivation, whatever, our own volition or will. So that's a very interesting question. I forgot his exact answer to that, but his general thesis was like, well, maybe, but like it still is like 51% good, 49% bad. Like technology, like we would prefer to have it not. But one thing he did say, which I really liked, was the sort of Amish approach to technology is they're actually not anti-tech, interestingly enough. He has a whole chapter on this, which is excellent. They're just very selective in which tech they use. And so they have, sort of a moral compass or a set of principles about like, okay, this is what we want technology to achieve. Does it help us in that, or does it hurt us in that goal? And so one thing they'll do is, they'll have maybe a new technology. They'll have the kind of early adopters, the geeks in the society that'll use it out first.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I would love to be that.
Right? That'd be super fun, right? And then, you got some like old dude with, funny looking hair that comes and it's like, all right, well, is this helping or hurting our goals? And so what's really interesting to me is they do have phones, which I think is interesting.
Okay.
But they don't have cars. And so the reason they were anti-car is that this basically allows people to leave the community. It doesn't strengthen the community ties that we want to build. Yeah. And so, it's interesting to me. I kind of like that goal of like, not just blanket tech is good or tech is bad, but like it's a tool. And we have to use our own volition as humans to figure out what do what I think makes us special or, unique as humans is deciding, I have this one fucking crazy life to live. What am I going to do with it? Does this thing help or hurt in that? And I think the biggest problem I see, and this is something I see myself, and something I used to do, I did more of these like meditation retreats. I did one like 10-day one. That was a very fascinating experience.
Like Vipassana?
Yeah.
I've always wanted to.
Dude, if you feel at all called, you have to try it.
Yeah.
I know it's like, it's hard
I
to
wanted
get 10 days off.
I was like fucking 16.
I haven't done it in a long time. I would like to do another one, but every time I get close, I'm like, fuck, I don't know if I can do this again. I did it when I was like between things. I kind of miss the glory days. It's beautiful to be working on something you care about. It's also beautiful to have downtime between that, And so in one of my downtime periods, that's when I did it. And it was cool for many reasons, but I forgot where I was going with that. The Vipassana tree was powerful. If you're so plugged in and can't take a step away, you may not even realize you're not using volition anymore. And I think that is the dangerous thing, is if you don't even realize you've gotten like completely, wrapped into the machine.
Right. And you're trapped.
You're trapped.
And you may not know you're trapped.
Yeah. But
if you're trapped, I mean, you got to think about what human nature is to do when you feel like you're trapped. And so it's like could it even be worse if you think you're trapped and then now you're like in this sort of like fight or flight mode? You're like, oh fuck, like I'm trapped in this world. Like, how do I get out? And you're like, you fight it, or you accept it, or you roll over and accept it. That could be a depressing thought. Or you fight it and like, you have hesitation or friction there, or you just like don't know about it and you're just like trapped by your devices, and like that could end up being worse. Yeah. So it's like, I mean, how do we break free of it?
And how do we get tools that serve us instead of the other way around?
So almost like how would I solve the problem?
Yeah.
It's like
how would you solve the problem?
I would make my own phone operating system that only had signal notifications, and like all I can do is like reply to texts or something,
So I love this.
It cannot do anything else. It can't have the capabilities of doing anything else.
I want to see a long tail of everything. So we talked about Nostr's long tail for content, for algos, for, potentially AI agents. We didn't talk a lot about that, but whatever. I want to see, a future where there's a long tail for like hardware too, and a long tail for operating systems. I would love to see, I know the Daylight guys are talking a little bit about this. Gigi had a post that I love, which is like, imagine you get a phone. I've wanted this forever, something like this, where you get a phone, you put in your 12 words, you've got a master key that has like Nostr child key, your Bitcoin or Lightning child key, and that's it. And you can, ideally have an open app store. Maybe some versions of this, you can't even download apps. It's like, no, all you get is Signal. Other versions, It's an open app store, whatever. But like, I would love to see a lot more choice. And, there was a blog post I haven't read yet, but I like the title of it, is turning your whatever normie phone into a dumb phone. Mm-hmm. I currently have the small iPhone because I like that it fits in my hand. I keep it in black and white mode. Those have been big steps for me, but I'm thinking more and more, how can I turn this thing dumber? Maybe over the next.
Or maybe like we just have to be smarter.
Yeah.
And just like go places without a phone.
Yeah. And just know to take that break.
And so like when I drive like about 10 minutes to go to the gym every morning, and like I'll still bring my phone because I do want to listen to music. I could probably use my iPod for that instead. But I do like Tidal, and I have been discovering new songs like at the gym, which is, like we talked about before. So I still enjoy it enough. Like, okay, I want Bluetooth headphones. I still want that. But like I'll just go with no hotspot. Like, so I carry around a hotspot anywhere I think I need it. But like sometimes I feel the most free when I know my where I'm at now and my destination I'll be at for most of the day will have Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
But I will not have any internet in any period between then.
Yeah.
And so like my travel, it's like I don't have to think. I can't check my phone. Like, even if I wanted to, I can't check it, and it feels great. I can still use technology for like, oh, what time is it?
Yeah.
Or oh, I'm listening to my downloaded playlist.
Exactly.
Or oh, I have to write a note for myself for later. Like I can still use technology. So it's like internetless phones, or like trying to be in places where you won't have internet. Or if you know you have internet, then you're like, okay, I know I'm not going to get fucked, right? Like we're so dependent on our phones that if we're without them, it's like, oh, well, what if I get robbed? Like sometimes I'll go without a wallet, and just the internetless phone, and I'll be like, and I'll have like a $50 bill in cash. Like I keep $50 bill in cash, or like $20 or something like that in my car. But like there's no internet. There's like, I don't have a phone that works. It's just like I have my car keys and I have like $20 in cash. Like I know I'm fine.
You sounds like you have an adventure there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just going to the gym in the morning. But like, even if it's just so small, maybe I'll go get breakfast after I'm done. And guess what? Like I'm limited by $20 and a phone that like doesn't have internet. Like it feels great. Yeah. Cause like nothing will go wrong. Like I probably will not die.
Yeah.
From being limited in that way. And it's dumb that I even have to say that to myself.
Yeah.
But it works, and it's free. And like those moments are like, wow, nothing's wrong.
Totally.
Everything's fine.
And to your point, we forget, it's not like, tens of thousands of years of humans haven't done this.
Yeah. Oh, and like, if I'm out with friends the whole day, like there's no problem. I never think about it. Like we are like, there's definitely many periods of time where I go like with internet on my phone and I never check it anyways. But it's the moments of boredness.
Yeah.
That I think probably it's like addiction and boredness. It's like the addiction comes out when you're bored.
Agreed.
And so
it's like standing in line or something.
Yeah. And so like I think maybe the problem is we have to get over being bored. We've lived in a world where being bored is bad. Yeah. And that most of the time you never have to be bored because there's always something there. Maybe boredness is the problem, or not being okay with boredness. Yeah. Or emptiness. Yeah. Our own thoughts. Yeah.
Coming back to,
I'm sure there's a lot of people that are not okay with their own thoughts.
Well, and that, I think about, I don't have any kids or anything, but like the one skill I think just becomes increasingly important over time is, you can have this in different ways, but meditation of some form, whether it's Vipassana or just journaling to yourself, but like just being okay with yourself in whatever moment. And that ability to also have sustained focus and attention, I think that's going to be the single most valuable skill set of the next, 20 years. Right. There will be those who can focus and they will run the things, and there will be those who can't and they will be run. I think it's that clear.
And it won't be like an obvious thing. It'll just be like, wow, how many ideas that you have had simply just because you had the right thought in the right time in a moment of silence.
All the time.
and those could be like the very best ideas. So it's not, I 100% agree with you that there's going to be a difference in people that like never experience that and people that experience that, but it's not obvious at all. Like if you look at what's the difference, it's like, oh, that idea sparked. You have to be open to the idea of things and open to experiences and new things, and just the same, you have to be open to like recepting an idea and like executing on it. So it's like if you never have that idea because you're always
plugged in,
then like, and you know, there's benefit. Like I get a lot of ideas from being online too.
As do I, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
But like, I do think you're right in that, like, it won't be obvious why.
Yeah.
But just being like okay with yourself and like being open to those moments of quietness.
Yeah.
To think about ideas that you never would think of otherwise.
Yeah. Which, by the way, this podcast is called Ideas from the Edge. So
it's perfect.
Apropos.
Nice.
And I guess one last thing out of that also is just, you know, the being openness to new ideas, 100% agree. I then think the attention and focus to be able to implement it. Because, okay, you have this great idea. Then the really challenging part is I sit down on my computer and how do I just prevent myself from like doom scrolling or whatever? It's like, no, I need to fucking code or whatever it is. Yeah. Cool. So we've been running for a little while. There's two more main areas I would like to discuss with you. So maybe we can run through these a little faster because I know we've been going on this for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was like 3 hours of discussion before this.
I know exactly. I almost wish we could have recorded that. It's such a pleasure. Right? We should do this more frequently. But one area that I want to talk about is this is somewhat related to business stuff, but also just kind of philosophy in general. Is open source. Like you're someone who obviously is a major open source advocate. You've done a tremendous amount. Open sourcing and working with stuff like Nostr Wallet Connect, obviously eCash stuff with Fedimint. We've talked a lot about that, and we can talk more about that, but I know you'll probably do that in all the pods, so I don't have to do all that here today. But one question I think a lot about is from a kind of a values perspective. What I like about a lot of the Bitcoin community, and particularly in my experience, the Nostr community, like, there's many different sub communities, but why I think I have gelled so much with the Nostr community is like, yeah, like Bitcoin's great, hard money or whatever, but it's also this idea of, no, we want open protocols, not just for that, but for communication. It seems to be, in my experience, people that are open to, like we've discussed, maybe more long tail of weird ideas, just like general openness in life, curiosity. So on the one hand, I guess two different sort of like values that I see in Bitcoiners, in particular in Nostr people. You have this like love of openness and love of the commons, right? Like, which is the protocol should be open. I would even call Bitcoin commons money. On the other hand, you have a true belief in capitalism and free markets, and markets as the way that nature, and I believe this is true. My belief is Bitcoin is energy-backed money. We're seeing metabolism happen in real life. This is how evolution, which is why I call my fun hive mind, is happening. The superorganism is forming, and markets are, maybe not the only way, but one of the most powerful ways to demonstrate that sort of metabolic system. But it's interesting because I feel like a lot of Bitcoin talk, it's purely focused on sort of, if you think about anarchism as sort of just like pure right anarchism, and obviously there's a lot of that, markets, free markets, amazing. Right. But I don't think people talk as much about why is there also such a pull for open source, which I would argue is more left anarchism. And I would argue Nostr and Bitcoin embrace elements of that as well. Perhaps more of the like Ellen Bitts or sort of Ben Art camp is, I guess, one way that he sort of, articulates some of this stuff. What is your view on how those two sort of fields of thought come together or don't? The two forces of anarchism we see in Bitcoiners and Nostr.
Yeah, it's hard because like that question weighs on us a lot. Yeah, because we do want to be a successful startup, and
right,
and we also, all three of us on the team, and four now. Yeah, I keep like we just hired a guy, our first hire this week, and it's really exciting.
Alpha drop right there.
It's so amazing to have that. It's relevant today because we today just released software that we've been actually postponing for many months. Yeah. Because we knew we would not be able to profit off of it. Yeah. We knew we had to release it as open source software. It's called Harbor. It's we don't have to get into the specifics of it. But we knew that no one would use it if it wasn't open source. Yeah. And it was very important that like the code is viewable, it's auditable, anyone could be able to be capable of running it. We do think it's something that someone, it's a privacy tool, and so we think like we have the right, like in this era where like privacy is being criminalized. Yeah, like people need to be able to run their own tools and seek the privacy that they need to seek. And it's also software that only runs client side. It communicates with mints. Like it's done in a way that, and we knew we couldn't profit off of it. We couldn't just artificially inject ourselves into it. Like there was thoughts of like, okay, how can we inject ourselves into this and actually make money? Because we do believe in it as a tool. I want to use this tool. We know other people want to use this tool, but and we could inject ourselves into it where we're like, okay, we're giving ourselves an excuse and reason to inject ourselves into it just so we can justify making money off of it.
Yeah.
And it's put us in a very difficult position because, I mean, we want to make money, but it needs to be open source. And so it just has gotten to the point for ourselves that it's like, okay, well, fuck it.
Yeah.
Like we know a tool like this needs to exist. We're going to build it as open source, and we're going to release it to everyone for free to be able to download it. We can have donations somewhere in there. We can say, hey, do you want to tip us? And actually today we've gotten like 2.5 million sats in donations so far. Yeah,
dude,
it's about $2,000 worth
Congrats.
of Bitcoin that we got in a few hours.
That's crazy.
Which is great. I love it because like also it's like it with
value
a tool,
for value.
Yeah, value for value with a tool that's like open source, and we're not like we don't collect any data off of it. We can't collect any data off of it, and it's best if a tool like this doesn't collect any data. So how can we MVP this? How can we prove that like the market sees value in something like this, and like donations is a really great way to see that.
Yeah.
I think going back to like the original question is like open source and closed source and businesses building on open source, or maybe businesses building on closed source too, possibly. When you look at other companies that have been successful in creating open source software, usually you find that they're always in a position to be able to monetize it as aggressively as possible. You see this a lot in database related software. So it's like, oh, hey, the database code is open source, but hey, build it, like you can use our cloud servers to do this in a really easy way. And then they're successful at it. You see like Docker, Kubernetes, and all of the, like there's a lot of infrastructure code that's open source. And there's a business to go along with it making very good profit.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these companies are like multi-billion-dollar companies.
Yeah. But they know, and it's very similar to Bitcoin companies. They know no one is going to use it if it was closed source.
Right.
Because you're not just asking, like in Bitcoin, there's a lot of cases where you're asking individuals to run potentially closed source software that manages their funds, and like that, you don't want that.
Yeah.
You don't want closed source software that manages your funds.
Are you suggesting a rugging could occur?
Yeah, I mean, like even if it's like quote unquote non-custodial, if that software is closed source and you can't verify it, like
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. So no one will run, but you're asking individuals not to run, put their money on something that's closed source. When you're creating like infrastructure tools that are open source, you're asking developers as individuals, hey, run our closed source infrastructure software. But you're also asking businesses to run your closed source infrastructure software, and like that almost never flies. Like huge corporations might want to use your product and pay for your product, but if it's closed source, they might not ever do that. Some because you're a single point of failure.
Right.
They might be very happy giving you some like multi-million-dollar contract. To both maintain that open source software and host it for you, and be there for support, and to train their staff on how to like they're quite happy to offload as much work to you as possible, because like they're making mega profits in other ways, and like that's a drop in the bucket. But if it was closed source, they know if you go down, our entire business might go down, or our entire line of products around this might go down. So like from a corporation perspective, it's kind of beautiful to see companies build MIT open source software, specifically because other corporations would want to use it. But then now you have individuals that can freely benefit from being able to self-host that. I don't know if that answers any specific questions, but like just commenting on the relationship and dynamics of corporations wanting open source software too.
Yeah.
and individuals that benefit from that.
Well, and that's what I was going to get at. It's interesting because, that purely from the economic story, it makes sense of like, okay, I don't want to use something that's a liability. I will gladly pay someone. The way I think about, with software or anything in life, you pay for it one way or another. You either pay for it with, if you're a company, you've got a lot of money, not a lot of time. If you're an individual developer, you've got a lot of potentially a lot of time and or skill, or both, perhaps not a lot of money. And that's an awesome thing. But I can't, and maybe this is just my own personal bias. I mean, I truly love both worlds. Like I am a capitalist, literally, but by definition, I love free markets. I think they're fantastic. But I also, recognize, I guess, having grown up in the South myself and like lived in Mexico for a long time, like, it's such a beautiful dividend to humanity that anyone with motivation and now an internet connection can just like get started, right? From so many things, whether it's open source software that they can build on, stand on the shoulders of giants. And so, it's interesting that these two different models, they're both driving society forward, and perhaps you actually need them. They're symbiotic with one another. But the dividend that they both give to humanity, and that ability for like the faster you can build our knowledge tower, or however you want to call it, the more open information is, the faster that goes, the more the superorganism can evolve, I guess. And at the same time, I just find it really beautiful that, whether you're, in Nigeria or Mexico or Brazil, it doesn't matter. Like you have a shot. Whereas in the old world, pre open source software, pre the internet, you didn't maybe you had more of a shot because you were away from technology and you were actually much happier. But that just to me seems like a much more beautiful, I don't know, harmonious, fair, right way for the world to work.
Right, and you can benefit off of that as well. So it's like, I don't know if hardware is the best example or maybe something else, but when we create certain very niche open source software, that could give inspiration to other people to build something similar to it.
Yeah.
Or
on top of it.
And on top of it, or it could even be play into the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
So talk about Mints a little bit. Nostr has this application layer that you can take advantage of things beyond identity. So there was this like Mint rating system that had kind of been created by a few individuals on Nostr, and you see Bob creating Bitcoin mints as a way to kind of recommend mints to other people, that and also to post mints that are public so people can see it. At the same exact time, we were building our own internal tools or our tools inside of Mutiny to be able to show that same data. So it's like all of a sudden, like, Bob, I think, launched Bitcoin mints like a week before we did. And that was fantastic for us.
Yeah.
Because that meant when we had our own more tightly integrated solution, it was already pre-populated with the right data that it needed. When we didn't have to and then when we launched, I think Bob said, like, oh my God, like hundreds of people have now recommended mints today with Mutiny's launch, and then now those show up on Bitcoin Mint. So it's like, it's not a competitor thing at all. Like in this scenario, like we benefit from Bitcoin mints, and Bitcoin mints benefits from Mutiny having these same features. So it's like this whole ecosystem of, like, sometimes things are ecosystem plays,
right? And
we know if we built this in the right way, that's open, that other people can build on top of and utilize, we know that, like, all we need, like, if 5 or 10 people do something with this, like, we benefit greatly from it too.
Yeah, amazing. So moving a bit in that direction, and we can close out here on this, but I'm very bullish. Increasingly, I told you I got eCash build recently, and I have been Nostr Wallet Connect build. I have seen tons of companies, including you guys. Albi, looks like Strike plugged in recently. A lot of people are plugging in Nostr Wallet Connect. That seems extremely bullish for me, particularly now that some of these mints are also speaking Nostr Wallet Connect as well, like Bob's Boardwalk Cash. Increasingly my mental model for the world, and this actually that Bob kind of sold me on as well, is that it's much easier for a company to integrate Nostr Wallet Connect because that's a few lines. We're using Nostr as a messaging layer than it is for them to plug into the Bitcoin Lightning Network. So if they plug in the Bitcoin Lightning Network, it's a giant pain in the ass with accounting and regulatory and, are people even spending their Bitcoin in the first place, so it makes it worth it? No, we should have our engineers focus on actually what drives money, blah, blah, blah. But if it's a few lines of code that uses a message to coordinate payments, and if anyone hasn't watched this, I recommend Bob's talk, Nostr's Bitcoin's Layer 3 from Bitcoin Tokyo or Nostrasia, whatever it's called. not Bitcoin Tokyo, Nostr Tokyo, Nostrasia. So increasingly, my model of the world is becoming that, Lightning Network is going to be the glue between all kinds of different, Bitcoin adjacent things. Increasingly, I thought initially that maybe it could be sidechains, maybe it could be, fintechs like Cash App. Increasingly, I think it's going to be more and more mints. Would you agree with that characterization of the world? How do you think the Lightning Network, Nostr Wallet Connect, and mints shape the future of what Bitcoin and payments look like online?
Yeah.
Easy question.
If you would have asked me year plus ago,
yeah,
I would have said like, okay, yeah, we're gonna have everyone talk via Lightning.
Yeah.
And you're gonna have users opening Lightning channels, and all that's gonna be great, and that's how like everyone's gonna be self-custodied.
Yeah.
And we're gonna be able to deliver that experience, and just quite simply we can't. It's like the last mile problem where we can't actually have open channels to individuals on the Lightning Network. There's like Bitcoin scaling issues, there's liquidity requirement issues, there's all those things. So Lightning has, in my mind, and it's not a new revelation by any means. Like, sometimes I'm a little bit critical of Lightning in that regards, and someone goes, well, duh. Like, we all knew for years, like, this was never going to work. And I was like, okay, well, maybe we needed to try to figure that out and to learn ourselves. So it's not going to be the thing that we all run self-custodial, but what is it great at? It's great at the interoperability as a payment network between two parties. And those two parties don't have to be directly connected. They could be anywhere on the Lightning Network. There's just nodes that payments go through in order to facilitate the payments in a non-custodial way. So Lightning is basically the ACH of the world. And so like no one knows the term ACH,
right.
Or I mean, a few people if you need to do banking transactions or whatever, a lot, but users just send money to like a specific ID when they need to do ACH things, and that's pretty rare. It's not as common as it used to be. So it's a protocol layer for sending a payment from one place to another. Mints kind of come into the picture because instead of doing the last mile problem, like you can't do fiber optics to the grandma in the woods in the middle of Texas, right? But you can do like a Starlink, and beam that to like 1,000 people in the area, or you can just do normal cable internet, and you can do that in a really easy way, and then eventually plugs into the greater internet. Mints are essentially that is whether if it's like cashew mints or like Fedimints. You can now have many users attached to a mint, and they have eCash instead of Lightning, but they can interoperate with the Lightning Network. So all of a sudden, you may have a mint with 10 people on it, and it's able to talk seamlessly to a mint with thousands of people on it or tens of thousands of people on it, and Lightning's just the glue to have that happen. Now, the Nostr Wallet Connect part is interesting because now you can get in a situation where at this point there's like, it's interesting looking at Cashew because there's probably like dozens of Cashew wallets that have sprung up in the last year, which is amazing and crazy to see. So far there's just 2 Fedimint wallets, so like, it moves a little bit slower. There's a lot of like consensus stuff going on. It's a little bit harder to work with it. So there's already dozens of wallets that exist that can interoperate with mints, but users might not be using the same one.
Right.
And so like if I'm using Wells Fargo Bank, I can like easily pay someone else that's within Wells Fargo Bank, and like there's no problem. It's easy payment. But how do I find that Lightning Wallet user, or how do I have an application that plugs into this whole mint ACH payment network like thing? And I think that's where like Nostr Wallet Connect comes in, because you can have dozens of different wallets, dozens of different services and service providers. And so like mints come in to help bring the scalability to payments, but we still need ways to talk to those payments, or send those payments and trigger the payment of those payments. So like Nostr Wallet Connect is sort of the glue for that. It's the application layer. You set it's basically just a payment request is all Nostr Wallet Connect is.
Right.
And the beautiful thing, like the reason why like Alby came, I think like Alby created it, and they were using it as their like custodian in the cloud. So like they were a custodian, and you could send a Nostr Wallet Connect message to them in the cloud, and then they would send the payment on your behalf. And like there's private keys involved, and so like, you know, it's not like anyone could just like take money out of your account. But it's just like, here's how to send a payment request to me. And so the reason why we liked it at Mutiny is because we ran a web app, you know, Bitcoin wallet, and you can't just like deep link to a web app. So like there's a lot of Lightning wallets where you just like click a button and like iOS just opens your default Lightning wallet. We couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So there's no way to like trigger Mutiny to like send a payment. And also Mutiny's non-custodial, and we run on the device only. So like there's no server in the cloud to process your funds. Like it's all like, if you close the app on your phone, there's no way to send a payment. Like the keys are on that phone, in that device. So Nostr Wallet Connect, when we realized, it took us a little while. Like at first we didn't like it, or I didn't like it. I was like, oh, well, why invent a new thing? Like I don't see the advantages here. Like, oh, it's just great for custodians. But when I realized that, wait, Nostr is this great async messaging layer,
right,
for applications, not just notes, not just like tweets and things like that. Someone can send a message intended to me, but send it to a relay, and the relays will hold it and store it until I come online.
Yeah.
And then I pull down the message, and then I see, oh, an hour ago, Bob requested money from me. Or I trigger then a Nostr, like what you see right now is like, I am the user of a Nostr application, either through the web or on my phone, and I queue up 20 or 30 zaps that I want to do, and then but those don't go out because my phone's wallet has to be open. Eventually, I open my wallet, and then all of a sudden, I pull down all those payment requests that have been triggered. And maybe it is like we kind of we did some proof of concepts with doing subscriptions this way. So, I mean, this is what powers our own subscriptions. Every single month, we will send a Nostr Wallet Connect payment method to any subscriber or Mutiny and saying like, hey, a month ago you said you wanted to pay monthly, so we're sending you this message. You may have been asleep at the time, whatever, but we can't, even though you said, yes, I want to pay you once a month, we can't just pull money out of your wallet. Like, we don't have the keys, and your phone needs to be online to make that payment. But with something like Nostr Wallet Connect, all of a sudden you open your phone once a week, like maybe it's been a few days, and now all of a sudden, like, your payment, your wallet pulls down the payment request that you authorized at the previous time in the past, and now you can pay it. Now we have subscriptions on top of Lightning.
Yeah, it's huge.
So it's not only just like it is a very powerful async communication layer for triggering payments and payment requests on Lightning, and it's also capable of being a subscription on Lightning. Like, users, like, people are used to swiping a credit, or not even swiping a credit card for a service, like putting their credit card number into Netflix.
Yeah.
Which, like, you can use a credit card. Like, I use one-off credit cards a lot, but you could use a credit card that has exactly $10 on it, and you're going to be charged. Well, Netflix is more like $25 a month now for like.
Is that real? I
think like with 4K and like all their special features, I think it's like $20 now or something.
Inflation really is there, right?
Yeah. So you can have a credit card with exactly $20 on it, and you give Netflix your private key to that. But like, realistically, like, I'm gonna hook up my normal credit card that has like some big spending limit, but now they have access to pull out like all my money if they wanted to, which is bad. Or I can do something like what we have in Mutiny, where it's like I can create a bunch of spending accounts, and I say this one is just for Netflix, and I approve $10 a month that can be withdrawn anytime I open the wallet and I see a payment request, like once a month, they can do this. So it's like we basically have created a like pull payment like experience, but have permission in a way of like they can't just take all of your money. Like, you are explicitly saying like they can send a $10 a month payment request to your phone. But as long as they're within that rules, yes, we would happily keep paying. Like, I want that. I don't want I don't want to go to Netflix once a month and like pull out my wallet, scan a QR code, and log into the website and keep doing that. So like, this is like the first time, and I think it still needs to be proved out completely. Like, this whole subscriptions atmosphere, but it's the very first time we could possibly do subscriptions on Lightning, on Bitcoin at all. Huge. And it's only possible because Nostr Wallet Connect. So that was my whole rant on Nostr Wallet Connect. But I'm sure there's like questions on like it specifically, but this is only possible because of Nostr Wallet Connect.
I absolutely love that. I think that was an excellent explanation. And I think, yeah, people are absolutely sleeping on how big of a deal this is. It's not just for Nostr apps, it's for any app. Bob already has it working in like Discord as an example.
Yeah.
So that's huge. I mean, this is the thing, I've told you I haven't written this yet, but the next piece, if I find the discipline to write, is for a company like Replit. Like I think it's so much more powerful. They can just integrate Nostr Wallet Connect, and then they can pay out to their users, who in theory have Lightning enabled or eCash enabled wallet wherever they live in the world. I just think it's people are sleeping on the power of subscriptions, the power of integrating Bitcoin payments with any app, and now dollar or whatever, potentially Cashew or Fedimint payments with any app on the web today, and that's possible and live right now. I think the amount of experimentation, I'm all in on Nostr Wallet Connect. I think the amount of experimentation we see there in the next 6-12 months is going to be wild. So
you want to hear something crazy?
Blow my mind.
So we know how Nostr Wallet Connects work. We know now we take a look at Fedimint, which is like federated eCash. It's basically a consensus network that is capable of doing eCash. But the guardians that run it will only do things like if they all agree in consensus.
Right.
Imagine, and this is, we want to build something like this. It's a little advanced, but we could, because it's a consensus system that requires a majority to agree to do something, you could have a Fedimint with a Fedimint module that's an NWC module.
Okay.
And what you could do as a user, so as I'm a part of a mint and I have 10K sats, in the eCash notes. What I could do is I could actually send, quote unquote, send my eCash to the guardians and lock it to their aggregate multi-sig pub key. And so the notes are only, technically speaking, I could just send the guardians my notes and say, do whatever with it you want to. But actually what I'm saying is you can only spend these notes if you all agree how to spend these notes. So it's from a unilateral control perspective. No individual guardian can just run off with the money with that specific eCash note money. So it's if I gave you and 4 people, I can't just give you $10. I can't, if your family was a guardian, all guardians, I can't just give you a $10 bill or the guardians a $10 bill and say okay, only spend this if you all agree. Whoever is holding that $10 bill can do whatever they want.
Right.
And with eCash, it's all digital. So whoever has a copy of that $10 bill can do whatever they want if it hasn't been spent before. So with something like this, an NWC module for Fedimint, I can lock the eCash note to the aggregate pub key of the Federation members, and they can only spend it if a majority of them agree how to spend it properly.
Yeah.
So then I can go and give an NW, and it's all NWC is all private key based.
Right.
I can give the spending permissions to, something like Bob's Discord.
Yep.
That can spend it if I decide to tip someone on Discord. And even if I'm offline, the beautiful thing is even if I'm offline, the request will go to the Federation Guardian members, and the Guardian members will decrypt the NWC message and see that, okay, this was Tony, this was for Tony's funds, this Tony's NWC module, Tony, this within his budget policy, and he's trying to pay. He authorized to pay whatever invoice on Discord that Bob's program wanted to spend to, as long as the majority and all, it doesn't go to a central server. All the Guardian members can query all the Nostr relays and find and decrypt these messages meant for it. And with all of that in place, all the Guardian members can independently say, yes, I propose to spend this eCash to Bob's Discord server. And they will say okay, it's I haven't seen the message yet. Oh, there, it just came in. Yes, I also authorize to spend it. And so once a majority of them do, then the payment, then the Guardians ask their own gateway to pay the Lightning invoice and redeem the eCash. And once they all sign off on the payment of the eCash. So it's a long-winded way to say we could have a federated spending account that is technically non-custodial. There's a lot of debate whether or not it's something like Fedimint and federated eCash is technically not custodial or not. But the fact remains, like, I could give my eCash to a group of people and say, only spend this if you all agree. And NWC can be how they can all agree, saying like, yes, an NWC message came in, we all checked it, and we'll make this payment for you on your behalf while you're offline.
It's badass.
Yeah.
It makes me think two things. The first is, it sounds like we're getting closer to a internet version of the state, which gets really interesting. You start thinking about, well, what does it look like, if we wanted to, take collective action, actually have, like the real DAO, you might say, of like, what does it mean if we wanted to, pay for some kind of public goods in a way like this online? That seems like a pretty powerful paradigm. And the second thing is, I think something you blow my mind with, not just with that, but something else you mentioned today, which really got me thinking, is a lot of the primitives that we were trying to build for Bitcoin and Lightning services might actually be better served with eCash. And so the example we're talking about is DLCs, and doing DLCs on eCash as well. And it seems to me that, and I'm sure other kinds of programmability that we haven't even thought of yet, or, you may have, but a lot of the stuff that we thought, oh, it's cool on Bitcoin and Lightning, but it's kind of tricky, like might just work better on eCash.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's a bit controversial, but how I view like Fedimint as, people will say like it's just all eCash or whatever. The way I view Fedimint is that it's its own like consensus network. In my opinion, it is a different type of DLT. It's a different. It's like not a blockchain. There's no blocks involved. It's not like but it is a ledger. Did I say DLT?
Yeah, you said DLT.
DT.
Distributed ledger technology.
Yes. Okay, I said that right. You said DLC, and now I'm all tricked up. Yes, it's a new type of DLT. It's an eCash based DLT. It's a bare asset based DLT.
Yeah.
But it's also like a cryptocurrency network with like consensus evolved, and it's like decentralized in the way that like not a single operator is running it. I almost look at it as like another. You could look at it like each Fedimint mint, its own cryptocurrency network.
Yeah.
And the reason you want, like, you're not putting your Bitcoin into this mint because you don't know how to take custody. It's not a custody solution. You still have to back up your eCash. You still have to back up your seed words. So it's not a custody solution.
Right.
I hate when people say like, "Oh, it's a custody solution." It's not. It's a way to have programmable money on a different network.
Yeah. And
the beautiful part about it is that it's not riddled in shitcoin properties where like, okay, we're going to get invest into this coin and you'll get rich off of, right? Like it's supposed to be one-to-one backed with Bitcoin. So there's no price fluctuations with Bitcoin itself. And yeah, you can do some crazy like USD based, mint stuff too. But even just looking at the Bitcoin use case, it's like, it is another network for programmable money.
Yeah.
In the form of eCash.
And I love that because that's, it's basically, you're saying it's a way to access new experiences you couldn't with your Bitcoin alone necessarily.
Yeah. You like, it's very hard to have, even just looking at the simple Bitcoin on-chain Lightning use case, like it's very hard to have a unified balance in Bitcoin that can spend across multiple layers.
Yeah. That
can spend on layer 1 and can spend on layer 2. Like it's hard to have that unified balance.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Tony, man, this has been absolutely awesome. We're jamming a lot of stuff. We covered a lot of ground. I wish we had the other 3 hours too. What did I leave out? Any, I don't know, crazy ideas or any thoughts in the future? Any visions that you want to leave us with?
We didn't even talk about identity.
Oh, fuck. We didn't get to identity. We didn't. Should we touch on that briefly?
Oh, yeah. What do you want to know?
Or perhaps we could do another session that maybe very high level. You did a lot of work with DIDs, which I find very interesting. Now, obviously, you're more sort of agree with the Nostr ecosystem. Obviously, I understand Nostr doesn't fully have verifiable credentials and all that stuff yet. Do you see a world where, Nostr can, evolve? Like what Nostr has that's so beautiful is adoption. And adoption and getting people to give a shit about your thing, that's really hard. That's actually something in my Kian podcast I thought was like one of the best things he said. And like what I think he's very good at is like just sniffing out, okay, is there even a journey to be had here? Cool. Once you have that, then like, okay, cool. Well, we have to have a lot of technical solutions. Obviously, a simple pub private key pair is not the perfect identity system. If you lose your private key, you're kind of fucked. We need a way to rekey. I'm sure we need a lot of other ways to attach verifiable credentials to that. But do you see a path where, Nostr can take this white hot core that it has for messaging, for identity, for all the different things, and evolve more into what DIDs want it to be? Do you see them interoperating one day? How do you see those two things going?
Yeah. I think about my Embracing Nostr article post from about a year ago, and like you touched on it, like the thing. I've been in the DID space, from the application side for a very long time, and like they fail to get adoption. They fail to get like product market fit. They fail to get any users interested in it, and it ends up being like they're building a very resilient and advanced system for identity.
But they just don't have anyone using it.
They have no one using it.
Right.
And like you could say it's too advanced. I don't think it's too advanced to build on top of. But you also don't, like, once you understand the complexities there, you probably have lost most developers.
Got it.
And so
I've tried to read over this stuff, and I've even had, and I actually like a lot of the people that I know are working on this. I find them extremely intelligent. But like, I've tried many times, and I'm certainly not the smartest person in the world, but like, it's gone over my head many times.
Yeah. And there's like so many like tiny little minute details, but like you can't live with it. Like you can't do development without those like minute details. It's like there's like trapdoors everywhere as you're like building out a thorough and advanced DID system.
Yeah.
And like you're just never gonna get through all of the little trapdoors that they laid, basically. So DIDs have, in my opinion, have failed to get developer interest, and because they failed to get developer interest, they failed to get like usable applications and users using it. Nostr, there is this identity layer. You can attach like profile pictures, names, like all of that to it. And they even have like, you can attach your name to like a well-known URL. So like you can kind of give some proof, like no one can fake that. You have to have like the private key and pub key to verify that. DNS is sort of centralized, but we're glossing over that. I think one of my, I think as an identity solution, Nostr has done a really good job of proving that users will use something like this.
Yeah.
Sure, it's not a complete system yet. What I worry, there's still a lot of like fundamental, like, it still relies on like DNS for the most part. You can do Tor things as well, but like, being able to back up keys, being able to have like different ways that you can recover your keys, all of that, it's lacking, but it can happen.
It's not unsolvable.
Yeah, there's actually a few people. I stopped working on things like that from decentralized identity things, but there are a few decentralized identity people that are like looking at Nostr and saying like, here's how you could do something that comply. At the end of the day, like decentralized identity is just like a spec for how to lay out a private key pair with metadata.
Yeah.
It's simple.
Yeah.
So it's like, yes, Nostr could 100% comply with the DID spec, in my opinion. It's just like, well, there's just no interest in the DID spec.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the main point. It's like the promise was, Microsoft was going to do decentralized, and they've done some decentralized identity things in Azure, actually. But like it doesn't surface up to the user as a benefit. They click whatever box they need to click in Azure to continue with the next step of the infrastructure setup process.
At high level, why is Microsoft interested in this? Like, how does it benefit Microsoft to not have your identity? In theory.
Yeah, in theory, liability. I mean, it all comes down to liability, right? Like,
well, but okay. So is that just because their business model is they're actually selling quote unquote value for value enterprise software, where somewhere like Google or Facebook would not necessarily want that because their whole business model is we want to track and own everything about your identity.
Right. Which could be changed. I mean, you see Jack Dorsey, he was a part of that world at Twitter, and he's like, well, this was a big problem for us.
Yeah.
Like we are like we could be considered liable for the messages that the users post, or like restrictive governments might see it that way.
Yeah.
So it's like that's a liability, and so because we have control and content over the database that the users post, then we could lie, like we can forge tweets, we can lie about things, and we can decide not to publish things, and we can drop messages. We have all this control. So just to take a step back and say like, okay, well actually we don't control this. Like when you saw that with Facebook.
Yeah.
Facebook like trying to do some Mastodon stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know how successful that's been. But I think liability and fear that governments will overstep their bounds is probably the only reason megacorps might be interested in something like decentralized identity.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned one other thing that I actually want to touch on, super important. A global identity space. This is something I've been thinking a little bit about. You mentioned, we glossed over, but we're going to come back to it for a second. DNS being not decentralized. Something I've been thinking a lot about is two questions. One, do we actually need a global identity space? And if we do, how do we get there? And the way I think about this is, on the one hand, one thing that I love about Nostr philosophically is it embraces what I see as the truth of the universe, which is there is no centralized view of anything. There's only 8 billion, soon to be potentially many more, competing perspectives or competing and cooperating perspectives. But there's not truth. And in fact, this is, you heard my podcast with Stu, I think I mentioned this, like my rant that I criticize. I like the scientific method, but what we call science, because reproducibility, the observer is always different. And that's way more important than people give it credit for.
Right.
So anyway, so what I love about Nostr is, there is no such thing as a truth. We don't know what your follower count, quote unquote, actually is. We don't know, if you're seeing, you'll probably never see 100% of the message on the network. That's probably impossible. You can get close and you can approximate, asymptotically to that, but you're probably never gonna get all of it. And that's okay, because that's how the real world works. Now, the closest thing that we've gotten to, quote unquote, a global, consensus on anything is Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, one, is very expensive to do that. That's what all the energy is actually being used for. That's what the block size wars were fought over, to keep enough nodes to actually, but like the point is, it's really fucking hard to do that. It's expensive to do that. And, this is, I think, one thing that I love in the Nostr community. That's, you take some of the cool ideas that came out of, quote unquote, Web3, and like clearly you didn't need a blockchain for that. But like, yeah, once you have, free market observers and decentralized identity, public-private key identity, okay, you can do some cool applications. Anyways, the question I come back to is, it's very expensive to have, quote unquote, central view of time or location of something. And even with Bitcoin, it's not perfect, right? You could have rollbacks. We've only seen, I don't know what the longest rollback is, but like, who knows? Maybe in the future, there's like some, new chip that comes and rolls a lot of things back. So it seems unlikely, but it's not, necessarily impossible. And so do you think that having a global identity space like we have with the .com today is important enough that we find a way to anchor that into Bitcoin? Which my understanding is that some of the did stuff, like what the Web5 block was working on, was trying to find a way to anchor into Bitcoin. Or we say, you know what, it's not important enough, and the web of trust stuff with Nostr is good enough, where, you're never going to get 100% certainty that this is the right place to point. But like, if Tony is pointing, like if I have enough people in my web trolling pointing there, like, let's just go with that.
I mean, that the latter there is what I believe in, because I mean, you don't even have, think of how many like fake Twitter accounts exist just to mock other people. So like, you could say, imagine there was a, like the extreme of this is like, okay, let's offload all of this work to a centralized entity, and they will be our global source of truth. Well, it's not working out.
Yeah.
Well, it both works out well enough on Twitter, and it also doesn't work perfectly on Twitter at the same time. So like, it doesn't work perfectly because there are tons of impersonations all the time happening on Twitter of famous people, and people do fall for that.
Yeah.
So you can't, you can almost say you can't solve that problem ever. But what has society been able to prove? That, okay, because let's say I'm a new user, I join Twitter, I try to find you on Twitter. So I search Max, and I'm like, oh, there's a billion other Maxes out there. Okay, so let me look Max Webster, and like, okay, I see 10 people all with like the same profile pictures. Like I've narrowed it down a little bit to 10 people, and like eventually I figure out how to find the right you. And there's a few ways to do that. I could if I know you from another method online, I could just text you and say, hey, which one's you?
Yeah.
So it's like society has a way to figure it out.
Yeah.
And we as humans have a way to figure out if there's impersonation or not. We still fall for it.
Yeah.
But like a global state doesn't help us not falling for impersonations. So why do it at all?
What about with DNS itself, or like even just having .coms?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're all kind of like a proxy for private public key pair, right? So by having like I think what you're referring to is like we have human readable pet names.
Yes,
for
correct.
people.
I don't know about pet names, but yeah, I like that too.
I mean, sorry. I mean, it's actually it's a concept in W3C actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just the concept. Yeah, pet names is kind of what they refer to. Nicknames, usernames. I don't know. I like you can still have. It's almost the same problem, right? I could search by name and probably find an impersonation, or I can just like try to figure out what the source of truth is based on the context, and the context could like this is where I think web of trust is very important.
Agreed. Yeah.
Because I could type like let's say we replaced websites with a Nostr public private key pair with a profile name. Like what if I just put in an let's say I go to my web browser and I just paste your npub.
Yeah.
In. That would be like the most if I knew your npub, that would be the most secure way for me to like go to your Nostr website. It's just like pasting your npub. No one would be able to fool that.
Yeah.
I would pull down your message. I would see it signed by the npub. There would be no problem. Now, let's say I try to type in just the words like Mac space Webster on internet browser. It would have like 10 or 20. Maybe we could have it where it just like goes to a single source and like pulls out your right npub, right? But like we could just, I don't know. I'm hand waving over the web of trust part, but like if it was an internet browser, if you put in a username, it could end up being more like a search result.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there's like these people that you follow that follow him, that follow this account and this specific max or that specific max. And it's like, okay, well, no one I follow follows that max, so I'm just not going to look at that one. But it could also sort the algorithm by like, okay, the top max is the one where 20 of your friends follow this one. So probably click that one.
And you could have a recommendation score. Eventually the AIs or your personal assistant can just get trained to do this for you.
Maybe it's just the first, it's like Ask Jeeves a long time ago.
Dude, I love Ask Jeeves. Dogpile.
Or even just like what Google was, where it's like, I'm feeling lucky.
Yeah.
So let's bring that back.
I love that.
I'm feeling lucky. So yeah, I think humans naturally solve the like pet name impersonation problem. And then with better tools like Web of Trust, we don't. I don't think we need a global identity.
Yeah, awesome. Any last thoughts or any? Maybe one last question I'll ask you. We're working on a lot of stuff. In some ways, the world seems very chaotic and crazy, but yet all this technology is so fucking cool. What would you say a decade out is kind of? I know it's impossible to predict technology moving so fast. What's an optimistic vision of the way the world could look if we're at least directionally successful in what we're doing?
I mean, I spinning off of that identity question is that we have normalized being able to log into websites or do things with our quote unquote identity where like we can't be shut down if they tried.
Yeah.
Even though like I do think naturally speaking, there will be markets for like, okay, make this a little bit easier for me.
Yeah.
Have something that's a little bit more centralized or a little bit more trusted. But I think in general, I would love to see, and I think technology could get to that point where me as the most self-sovereign user possible looks exactly the same as the user that is offloading as much trust as possible, because that's what they feel like. I do not want to be treated differently for my self-sovereignty as the person that decided to offload it because it was just too much and they didn't want to deal with it, or like they trusted Facebook to log in. But like I don't want to be treated differently than that. So just because I seek my own privacy and I seek my own self-sovereignty, I shouldn't be criminalized or discriminated against. And like I do think tech can get to that point.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to see the most.
I love it. Tony, this has been amazing, man. Anything else? I don't know.
No. Yeah.
This was a long one.
This was great. I love
this. Was
it.
so much fun. Yeah. We should definitely do this again.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Wow.
Woo, yeah,
that was great. I love that.